We'll now return to open session. We do not have any reportable actions to report on the closed session. Items 4A1 and 4A2 regarding the graduation waiver requests are part of the consent agenda. And I heard the superintendent just say, so I'll just ask you.
Aren't you pulling 4A?
I haven't gotten to the consent agenda yet. So first I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And now I'll ask if there's anyone willing to volunteer to read the board norms. And it looks like
I
Mr.
will.
Kevin Saavedra.
The board will come prepared and be fully present and engaged, deliberate effectively and listen openly without interrupting, work collaboratively and build toward consensus, maintain perspective with a sense of humor, not repeat each other or ourselves, not have side conversations, give full attention to the proceedings, no cell phone use, focus on the best interests of all students, and commit to no surprises.
Thank you. So next, I'll ask if there's public comment on the consent agenda. Okay, no public comment on the consent agenda. So next, I will ask for an approval of the consent agenda. I would like to remove item 13D for separate discussion. Do any other trustees have an item that you'd like removed from the consent agenda? Okay, can I ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda with item 13D regarding student B removed, please?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And I think what would be, I'd like to do, rather than wait to the end of the meeting to discuss, and actually I'm going to wait until after we vote on the consent agenda. Maybe that would be good. So all those in favor of the consent agenda, passing everything on the consent agenda minus 13D, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye, that passed. Thank you. So now, rather than wait till the end of the meeting, I think it's easier to keep track. I'd like to move item 13D for board discussion. And item 13D is regarding a graduation requirement waiver request for student B. And I am concerned and perplexed, and I think I just maybe want to ask, why did the principal at Tam High send something to the board asking us to, a waiver that's against board policy, that's counter to board policy? I'm still confused. Board policy 6142.7A. Why is this even here? Do you have any idea, or?
I don't want to speak for the principal of Tam High. I understand the board's confusion. I think it is I understand the board's confusion. I think that that
Okay.
is a difficult waiver to receive, knowing that, given the information that's on there, that does not comply with the requirements for a PE waiver that's in alignment with our board policy. I acknowledge that.
I'm also concerned with some of the material provided, and I am concerned that families are provided very clear information and direction, and that the district tighten up how we communicate with families, but maybe how we codify that communication. I'd really ask that you look into that, because I did find some of the material concerning.
Noted.
Thank you.
And I share those concerns expressed by Ms. Hollander. And then also, just want to say that when we grant waivers, I mean, we've put together, the district's put together an education program that they think is the best education program for students that are enrolled in the district. And when we give waivers, or when waivers are recommended, it's because of extenuating circumstances, and then a similar course requirement can be met through alternative means. And it doesn't seem that that has been met here. And I think it's important to kind of keep the integrity of our educational program to the extent we can, except in those cases where there are extenuating circumstances. And I don't think that exists here.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Any other board members?
I guess just echo the concern in terms of looking at something that's been approved at the school and not entirely consistent in terms of the paperwork with it, so it's unclear in terms of where we should stand on this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I'm for sure the waiver does it doesn't merit a waiver based upon the facts, but the circumstances and the communication is concerning to me, and how we got to where we are now.
Anything else? Okay. Thank you. Okay. So if we don't need any further discussion.
I move to deny the waiver to student B.
Is there a second? All those in favor of denying the waiver, which is item 13D, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? Nay. So make that note, Mary, please. We have 4 ayes and 1 nay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, so now we will move on to the student trustee orientation, and thank you to our new trustee, Karen Lobica, right out of the blocks, has taken this on. So I think I'll just hand it right over to you, and we'll spend some time for our student trustee orientation. Thank you.
Well, hello. I'm excited to be working with the 5 of you, minus 1 tonight, going forward. And it's a little bit like the blind leading the not blind a little bit. So I appreciate your patience, and hopefully we'll be able to help each other out and make this a mutually beneficial experience going forward for the year. I know all of you are returning, and we really appreciate the duty that you are serving and the responsibilities that come with it. So really appreciate that. So the student trustee board information, you all received that. And it's updated in terms of dates. Pretty much everything is the same as it was last year. And by the way, board, please jump in as I leave things out. Not if I leave things out, but if indeed I do. You know what our board, I'm going to kind of go through it, but not spend a lot of time on things that you are well versed in. So the board norms you're very familiar with, we say, and evaluate at the end of each meeting. You're often not here at the end of the meeting, but we do sort of self-evaluate and see how we do. The next couple of pages are really the crux of your student orientation. You know how to get in touch with either Dr. Topier through Mary O'Leary. You know how to get in touch with the rest of us, and in your new updated package, you've got my information as well. You know that the agenda is sent to you online the Friday before each board meeting. You're aware of and have been meeting with your school principals before each meeting. Do you guys normally meet the same day, like Tuesday mornings, and for the meeting that day? Ish? Yeah. Yeah, okay. But
In close proximity too.
close, exactly, within 48 hours or so. The student trustees board meeting report. This is probably the one thing I do want to spend a little bit of time on to make sure that we are all clear on what is expected on both sides. Excuse me. You have also in front of you the Tam Union High School District mission statement, as well as the key goals for students based on the LCAP. As you give your reports each week, you're asked to give about up to a 3-minute report, and they're so valuable. What we'd really like you to consider as you give your reports is how it relates back to our mission statement and our LCAP goals. So, for example, an anti-racist initiative as part of our mission and our LCAP goals, talking about SOAR, and I know a lot of you do report back on some of the SOAR activities, or the anti-stress, or helping provide wellness for students, talking about having things on campus that might help, or programs available that you've attended or heard of, therapy dogs, even something like that, but just so that we know that things are moving forward and what has been your experience or your community's experience. That's really helpful. While we like to hear about the calendar of events, let's not just make it, reading through the calendar, although some of those comments are really fun to know about what's going on your campus, and I think Leslie in particular.
Right. I've always appreciated when you provide information about upcoming events that and provide a little bit of context and the meaning behind them. I think last year I appreciated hearing about the sleep awareness week.
Right.
And it took you just a few seconds, but that's something through our wellness. It's a topic that we're concerned about. So I liked hearing that. And then, so I find it helpful when it's not just a list, but there's some context to it. And especially if you're aware of something that's coming up that, again, is in alignment with what you know is important at the board level, that we would maybe want to follow up with the superintendent and see about attending. So that's what's been helpful, too. For instance, I think, Maddie, when you talked about the Unity Games last year coming up, it was helpful to hear. Those sorts of things are helpful. So thank you.
And also keep in mind that your reports are not discussion items. Just like public comment, when you present to us your reports, provide your reports, it's not, we can ask some clarifying questions, but it can't become a discussion item. And that relates back to the Brown Act, which I think Maddie, were you the one that was asking about the Brown Act? Someone had asked for further clarification. I apologize for kind of pointing at you. Okay. You do want to go deeper into Brown Act?
Well, I mean, we don't have to now. It was definitely more,
That's fine.
Like, I know the general basis
Yeah.
of what people are allowed to and allowed to not
Right.
do, so I wanted the more. It was more of a, when we were doing this in a discussion during board meetings.
Got it. Okay. And we can spend time on that for sure. So just to clarify, with the Brown Act, for example, I think it was the last board meeting, we started going down the path of class sizes and how it was felt between teachers and students possibly. We cannot really get into a discussion about it because it was not, at that time anyway, because it was not an agendized item, which means that the public didn't know about it in advance, so that they didn't know to come and participate in that conversation. Does that make sense? That doesn't mean to say that if something warrants becoming an agenda item, that we can table it and put it on the agenda for next time. Does anyone want to add to that or clarify?
And so, yeah, there can't be extended discussion, but they can update us on these are concerns at the site. This is how it's playing out, and then
we'd
we
love to hear
decide
that.
whether to continue.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, to put it on a future agenda.
I think a good rule of thumb is clarifying questions, right? So I think clarifying questions, but when you start going deeper than clarifying questions is when you start skirting the edges of the Brown Act around a potential discussion that could later influence a vote. It's kind of gray, but so I think clarifying questions are fine, right? And those are usually fact-based. Was it 10 or 12? Was it, things like that. So
Yeah.
I think that's a good rule to follow.
Yeah. Any questions about that? No, that's probably pretty clear. Yeah. Kara?
But just to make sure, but like we are able to bring those kind of topics up, just not expect there to be a discussion, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We absolutely want to hear from you on that, especially as it relates to your community. That's you are the voice of your campus.
And if I could just, because we discussed this a little bit too, it's not so much your personal experience as much as bringing the experience from campus or issues on campus.
We expect you to get that feedback from your fellow students, and there's any number of ways that you do it. Can you maybe share with me the ways that you gather information?
Because I just have such a small campus, I often just go to our SIS room, which is sort of just the gathering place of everyone, and I just go to some random student and I start a conversation about something I talk about in that particular meeting, and I ask their opinion on it or what they want to even for me to talk about.
But so for Drake, which is the largest school, it's easiest we have various sort of representative bodies at Drake. So we have the leadership, which is you're elected to, so I go and talk to leadership, or there's a more democratic body, which is Student Senate, which is one representative from every single advisory, so that should be a very even and accurate assessment of the whole school. And then also going and talking to specific people, specific organizations, so going and talking to people in different SLCs or in junior, senior academic programs, or talking to our different student organizations like our peer resource or our SOAR. So doing things like that, trying to get to all of the larger bodies in that way is hopefully the best way to try to cover the most different student opinions.
Sure. I'd love to hear how you're gathering the input.
Quite similar to Maddie at Drake. I try and talk to leadership, or same thing within our TAM news. I'm in the journalism department, so kind of topics that are coming up in editorial discussions or within leadership on kind of concerns to bring to admin. I'll kind of listen to those and then talk to other students. I also just talk to kids who I know are in various programs and stuff, and check in. I also I ask my freshmen and linkers sometimes, what are you thinking? And they kind of always have a different perspective because they don't really understand the school, but they kind of can point out things that we're just used to, but maybe you're oh, maybe that isn't working super well, or yeah, that is kind of a weird thing that we do, maybe we should change that. So kind of trying to talk to random people, and then kind of getting, if they're oh, that kind of seems to be a little bit more controversial, I'll talk to more people, but try and just get a general sense from every kind of program on campus.
Great.
Yeah, I do pretty much the same thing that Kara was saying, but I speak to the ASB, Associated Student Bodies. That's a mix of leadership, and then sort of like the Student Senate at Drake, it's a representative from each homeroom. And so that's usually a pretty good sampling of all the different groups on campus. So I get to hear from drama, SOAR, obviously leadership, and then just at various events talking to people of different grade levels. I found, like Maddie said, or like Kara said, freshmen always have a different opinion.
Oh, yeah.
Which is funny. So yeah, just talking to people of different grade levels, at these different events and stuff like that.
That's great. Good. Thank you for doing that. It's brings a lot of value. Please participate throughout the meeting. Ask clarifying questions when you are given the opportunity. And you do have advisory votes on all consent agenda items?
No, just on non-consent.
Non-consent, sorry. I always think I'm learning which agenda
okay.
items are there.
Yeah.
So you do have those advisory votes, and we really encourage you to weigh in. So number 6, discuss important issues with your fellow students. We've already talked about. And, you know, we appreciate that you've got a heavy school workload. Some of you might be getting to sports events or whatever, or might just need to sleep. So we try to put all of the important, bigger items at the beginning of the agenda. Hopefully you can stay for those, and then if you need to duck out, that's obviously okay to do so. I think we placing an agenda item for an upcoming board meeting. You can indeed ask to have something placed on the agenda, and you do so by contacting the superintendent directly, and she will then have a board member work with you to develop that agenda item. So that's important too. You know, that's kind of it. The rest of it, I think you are familiar with. There's additional information in terms of your role. Again, I encourage you to really understand the mission and the 4 primary LCAP goals, so that when you're listening and when you're reporting, you help keep us in check too. That indeed those are what's driving our decisions and our conversations as well. Any questions or requests? Awesome. And there's a calendar there too with all of the, there's one error though. October 8th is not a board meeting, it's October 15th, but that's been corrected on the calendar.
Thank you, Karen.
Pleasure.
Is there any
Thank you.
public comment? Also, in terms of the advisory vote, I know I'm not consistent in asking for that. There was a period there that you were doing a lot, especially when we were talking about the budget. So if I don't ask for an advisory vote and you would like to, just holler out my name. Part of my problem too is I don't, I'm usually looking this way to see if board members want to talk, and you're all the way over here, and I have a stiff neck. So always feel free to interrupt me. And also, I sometimes, yeah, not you though. I'm letting the student trustees. Anyway, my other challenge is that, and luckily fellow board members clue me in, is sometimes you'll want to ask a question of the speaker, and I'm not even looking at you because I'm looking in this way. So don't be shy, and don't. They just throw them at me, yeah. But anyway, so we got to work together on that. Maybe a good way to get my attention, because there have been times, thankfully, that somebody else always says, "Oh, you know, Kara wants to ask a question," or whoever. So thank you. But thanks again. I'm really glad that you're back, and it'll be a good year. And then I do have to say, I do see, I think your students that are in the office, you're in the principal's office. If you're here for public comment, whenever our public comment is at the end of the meeting, and since you're students and you have homework and you need to sleep, I will have 2 public comment periods. So if you're here for public comment, I will offer to ask the board if they would like to revise the agenda so that we have public comment earlier.
They're here for an AP Comp essay.
So we will not offer. Sounds quite interesting. Okay, thank you for that. So we will not do that. Okay, so now we'll move on to agenda item
Do they have a
11.
choice in the topic?
Yeah, this was not your choice, I assume, but well, I'm impressed. Yeah. Boy. So we'll move on to item 11, which is the student trustee reports. And do you want to just start at either end, or? Why don't we start with, I don't know, it's been a problem since I've been on the board with microphones.
It's the static has
Yeah.
been problematic, so
Get together like you're singing, you know, when people
Yes.
sing.
So anyway, The year is in full swing at Drake. We're almost at the end of our first reporting period, R1, which is crazy. It feels like school has just begun. So at Drake, our student senate, what I talked about, we're looking forward to the rest of the year, and we've planned the major issues we're going to touch on. So we haven't begun discussing any of these, but just as a heads up, the main things we're going to be focusing on are, in the beginning, a bit about, as I think I said last board meeting, the homecoming court, and having that be not just a king and a queen, so having it be gender neutral, the royalty, and also what we did last year, which seemed to really work, is as a way to try to get different people be nominated for homecoming royalty, as have been in the past. We've made it be superlative based. So you nominate people for specific categories. So there's people who've done the most community service, or are the most musically oriented, or the most artistic, or the most athletic. So then that makes it more of a variety of people who are nominated. And then so those people make up the homecoming court, and then you still have the nomination of within those group of people, then you nominate the two people who this year will just be the two top royalty. They get to choose their title, so king, queen, dame, knight, whatever they would like to go by. So we're going to be doing that this year. And then in Student Senate, we'll be also discussing our SLCs at Drake. We've been doing lots of ongoing discussions about SLCs, and just how to fix some problems or improve, or just taking a second look at them. So that will be an ongoing thing within our Student Senate. And another thing that will be brought up is re-looking at senior photos. In senior photos, you have to wear either the swoop neck dress or the suit. So looking at if students would want to change those options, or make it more clear that those options aren't necessarily tied to gender. You don't have to choose one if you're not. I personally chose the suit, so it's very easy to do, but not everyone knows that you can. So at least making that more clear, or just re-looking at that. So yes, so then also at Drake, there have been some changes this year with the rotation of teachers. So a lot of our organizations have new teachers, so like ComCAD, the Jolly Roger, SOAR, because it's a new class, and all have new teachers this year, and ASB, it's the teacher's second year. So students in those organizations are getting used to the new teachers and the new way they run things, and figuring that out. And then finally, we had a leadership summit a few Fridays ago. So what that was is it brought together the leadership organizations at Drake. So those were leadership, ASB, SOAR, and Peer Resource. And those organizations, while they do have a lot of overlap, haven't really worked together in the past. So this is sort of trying to begin building a relationship between those organizations, so they know how they can help each other and how they can most efficiently divide jobs to do. And so this was a whole day where those three organizations got together, and they all wrote mission statements for their own organization, and read those mission statements, and just talk to each other about their organizations and their goals. And they also talked about which students at Drake go most underrepresented or most need allies in leadership bodies, and how best to reach those students. So hopefully that's going to be starting an ongoing relationship between the three organizations this year.
Any clarifying questions? That was very thorough. Thank you. That was good. Thank you. Charlotte.
Okay, so the biggest event that's been happening on the Tamalpais campus this week has been team leaving for their Sierra trip. Their backpacks have just been covering the entire courtyard all week. They've been practicing setting up their tents. It's been a truly extraordinary event to watch. Something that they did very incredibly was they had a car wash to raise money for their trip. Their goal was $1,200. They ended up raising $2,100. So that covered any additional costs for their camping trip and probably even their upcoming trips. So, for any of you guys worried that team costs too much money, they do a lot of the fundraising themselves. On the trip themselves, they're going to be hiking anywhere from 3 miles to 8 miles a day, and they're going to be gone until October 4th. So it's going to be a truly intensive trip. I'm sure and since this is their first big trip, it'll surely whip those new teamies into shape.
And where is it?
In the Sierras. Mm-hmm.
And how many?
So it's one big group of 24, but they split off into 2 groups of 12. But they sort of meet up at 2 points. They start together, they split off, and then they meet up at the end together. Yeah. Independent Study has been starting their, what I call, super advisory. It's all the advisories are at the same time. So far, they haven't been coming together to do anything with the different grades or the different programs, but they have been planning the Halloween party to do the big event together. Right now, the seniors are planning the Halloween party. Each grade and program is going to be planning their own event. So the juniors will plan one, the freshmen will plan one, the CEC program will plan one. It'll all rotate. CEC has been, I've noticed this, and everyone else has been noticing this. The CEC students have been integrated into mainstream classes more often than in prior years. They've been doing this to get sort of a more rounded curriculum. In past, they've only been doing online classes with a very few exceptions. Now they all have a science class with John Black, so they have a lab science credential. And now they often have math classes with the mainstream students. They have other science classes with the mainstream students. It's a more mixed group. We just had back to school night, and we've noticed that the population was bigger because more team parents showed up. We had a lot more parents because, as you know, our Pathways program doubled, so we're going to get a lot more parents due to that. And like always, we just have a fluctuating class of independent study students, and because this year we have quite a few independent study students, so the parents for that were high. Also this year, Kim, our principal, is creating an advisory group of students, sort of as a student government. I'm not sure what their role will be yet. It's still in its planning process. It'll be 2 students from each grade, and it'll be as an advisory for both her and for the school. They'll take on tasks and create not so much the planning of parties, but they'll take on tasks that no one has done in the past because we don't have a government. I'm hoping to see it created before I graduate, but I'm looking forward to see what happens. Thank you.
Kara.
Hi, just real quick, you brought up the homecoming thing, something that I was going to say this, but my sophomore year, so 2 years ago, they started doing a homecoming court because they kept having people nominating people who were very they represented themselves as female, but they were getting nominated for king, so they're screw it, we're just going to do a homecoming court. And that's been really successful. I just noticed in leadership this year, nobody said anything about it. It was okay, who's doing homecoming court this year? Just that you were you were on the court. We don't assign them titles or anything. I think they both had crowns last year. I don't remember what it was, but it was trying to not associate any gender with it. So there's no gender association with any nominations or anything. So you saying that about Drake but yeah, it's completely they say, what does it take 2 to 3 years to get a tradition to change? So that has been a clear, smooth sailing from now on with that at TAM. But on Friday, we had the big football game against Redwood at Redwood, although TAM took a pretty hard loss. I think everyone had a lot of fun. I think it was the best school turnout to a football game anyone's seen in years. Kids were excited. Kids were like all the week before. Kids were like making posters with the football people's names on them or their faces, and both schools handed out the same whiteout shirt that it was like respect. I'm assuming all of you saw the shirt. It was cute. So kids were just excited for that. Both the field hockey and volleyball teams both like were forced to go because went as a team because the football team, the football coach had been encouraging his kids instead of practice on Friday, they'd do like a walkthrough and then they'd go to the field hockey game and the volleyball game. So there's really a good, with the three big fall sports, really good kind of camaraderie between the three. So hoping to keep up the school spirit throughout the rest of the year. But yeah, everyone was just super excited. Even though we lost, it was fun. And then we have the big kind of change this year. We have our TAM Unity Days 4 times a year with food trucks and stuff. A big change this year is that they're going to be closed campus. Administration and leadership is kind of working out the logistics. But I mean, as you've seen with TAM, it's kind of no gates or anything. So I think they're still trying to figure out how to keep kids on campus because sometimes there are struggles to keep them on campus during just school hours. So to keep them on campus during lunchtime will be interesting, but I think leadership kids are at least excited to try and see how this works. There's some confusion over what's going to happen with kids who don't have a 7th, and leadership is pushing to hold them until the end of lunch and then they're released. So we'll see what happens there, but I think it's a fun trial run. Also,
Kara, can you briefly describe to Karen Lobica what Unity Day is? Because all we heard was food trucks, and I know there's a lot more to it than that.
That's our iconic one. So 4 times a year, lunch is extended 10 minutes, so it's a full hour long. The big thing is we try and bring food trucks onto campus to get kids to stay on campus. So this year we're like trying to force them to stay on. But it's supposed to kind of be a day where everyone, or at lunch at least, to bring everyone together and that kind of thing. It's the week after homecoming this time. It's normally linked to a rally, so like trying to bring up the school spirit. But like our peer resource normally does like condom distribution that time. JSA does voter registration. Animal kindness does some stuff. Like last year they like make your own like vegan dog treat, or like they made like the water bottle toys one year. I don't know, that kind of stuff. Like during the winter one last year, we all made those like a shake globe that had like glitter in it as like a de-stress from wellness. Sometimes there's like just kind of anytime, like a lot of groups do educational stuff, like forgetting which organization did it, but you put the drunk goggles on and you have to like walk in the line to talk about like drinking and driving. Our Ocean Sustainability Committee is selling metal straws next to the boba booth this time to try and get kids with metal straws. So kind of just like a lunchtime to kind of bring everyone together. So yeah, it's been super successful. So yeah, we'll see how keeping kids on campus, but if it works, I think it'll be really exciting because it'll really bring the event to its full potential. The other thing is the Mill Valley, I don't know if it's the police department and the city council are creating like a youth advisory committee, which are open to anyone who lives in Mill Valley or who goes to TAM. So even if you live in Sausalito, Marin City, or you're transferring from a different school, you're welcome along. You go to TAM. I think kids are really excited about that to try and tackle the some things that are going on with TAM, from like the incident that happened last weekend at one of the elementary schools to scavenger hunt and that kind of stuff, which I think kids, I'm not applying for it, but I have lots of friends in leadership who are, and kids who aren't in leadership who are excited by the opportunity, so I think that'll be a fun way to work with that.
Thank you. Lauren.
So Redwood homecoming nominations are also this Thursday, and last year we did the same thing as TAM and changed it so it's not based on gender at all. You just nominate 12 people. And last year it did work out that it was still 6 boys and 6 girls, because I mean that was the first year that we did it. But we didn't really hear any complaints about it. We just called it homecoming royalty. And then, like Maddie said, people could just choose their title at the end. So that worked well, and we're going to just keep it the same for this year. Today and tomorrow at lunch, we've had Club Day, which was super successful. We had more people sign up for tables than we've ever had before. And it looks like a lot of fun for freshmen trying to get involved. They all go and sign up for like 10 clubs at once. And then we have a spike ball club that was setting up like a tournament on the South Lawn, which is super fun. Like Kara said, the game night last Friday was super successful. We've never seen that many people at a football game. Something fun that's been going on, our athletic director, our principal, and our assistant principal, as long as, with some other teachers and counselors, have been going around with a bunch of the varsity teams and practicing with them. So they do that every other year, but they're doing that like in the next couple weeks. So they did field hockey today. So it's just fun for kids and trying to help them like get to know admin a little better, feel comfortable like approaching them about other issues. Last Friday, SOAR students went to Drake with Tam and Drake students for discussion and brainstorming about anti-racist activities. So this was the Beyond Diversity training. And then some students came back and reported out about what they talked about during leadership. So they split into two groups. It was basically, I don't want to call it like beginners and advanced, but it was people that had been a part of SOAR before, that were focusing more on like activities and events that they could incorporate on their campuses. And then the other group was maybe people that were just trying to get more educated about SOAR and about the issues that they discuss, that if they hadn't really been a part of it before. We have Character Day this Friday, so that's something that happens all day in the library. So teachers can sign up their classes, and I know a lot of students have actually been encouraging their teachers to sign up. So you go into the library and they show a video about just developing character traits, finding yourself, and interacting effectively with other people. And so it's mostly for underclassmen who are like learning to, I don't know, be on a high school campus with 2,000 kids. So we'll see how that goes, but we've done it for the past couple years and it's been really successful. And leadership has been discussing just a little more about homecoming nominations, how to get not only just more turnout and people voting for the royalty at the end, but also just increasing diversity on the court. Because last year we just had one like homogenous friend group. So we might talk about doing the superlative-based nominations, like Maddie was saying. So I'll bring that up in ASB on Thursday. So, yeah.
Very, very nice. Thank you. Any comments, clarifications from the board? Okay. Thank you. No public comments, I assume. Thanks. Okay. So now we'll move on to trustee considerations, and the first will be Tara Topier for the Student Achievement Report. And this is an information-only item.
Okay. Hello. Hi, everybody. So tonight I'm going to be presenting what we call our Student Achievement Report. We do it every fall. It's a various sets of data around how our students are doing from SATs, ACTs, APs, and our CASP results. Maybe I'll do it. There you go. So just an overview of what we'll be looking at tonight. I just want to emphasize that these are not the only things we consider to be part of student achievement. These are some of the most commonly measured metrics for student achievement. Clearly there is more, such as character and things like that go into our definition of student achievement and what a well-rounded student is. So I just want to make that clear. I do want to start with our 2019 administration of the California assessment, or the Smarter Balance test. Overall, as a district, we're pretty steady to slightly up. There were some gains that were noticeable, particularly Drake High School's math scores improved significantly, which was really exciting. Yep, they worked on it. But and that's the point, right? We take the data as a formative assessment, look at where we're maybe missing some things, and try to improve in those areas. So this is a 4-year comparison of all of the schools. On the left in the yellow headers are the English language arts, and on the right are the math. So you can see at San Andreas we also had an increase in math. So for our, we don't have comparative data yet. We won't have that data probably till the end of November, meaning if you look at these for the first years, you can see that we have, the county and the state, but we don't have that yet for this current year. But we hope to soon. Yeah, so in English language arts, I think a few things. San Andreas has continued. You know, this is their sort of fourth year in a row with an increase, which I think is encouraging. We've had sort of ups and downs in the other areas, but overall maintained fairly steady. This is just a more specific breakout. So instead of just, met the standard or not, this is how all of the kids who participated last year, where they fell within each school. So in case you can't see the colors, the bottom is standard exceeded. The next one up is standard met. The third one up is standard nearly met, and the top purple is standard not met. Welcome. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And then this is the breakdown of what we call the claim areas. So this is breaking the data down in another way. So how the students fared within these 4 claim areas, as you can see what they are. What I don't know is why the metrics are slightly different in the claim areas, where you just have percent below standard, percent at and near standard, and then percent above. So if you notice in the previous one, they break it into 4, and this one they break it into 3. So this is the darkest here is the below standard. This next is at or near, and then the lightest is above standard. So one thing to note is I know a few years ago, listening we were not scoring so well in listening. So that's been data that the English department has taken back and worked on and improved. So this is just what a score in the claim area means, just to give you a little more understanding. This is just the reading one, but this is essentially what the rubric looks like. So what does a student need to do to demonstrate that they're above standard, so on. So here's the breakdown. And we use the term ethnicity here instead of race because that's how it's defined by the CASP assessment or the Smarter Balanced assessment. Of note here is that our African American student group has continued to increase their performance over the years, which has been a focus of our work, is how do we better serve our Latinx and African American students. So that we have been doing a lot of work around culturally relevant pedagogy and also taking a look at the materials we use, along with how we teach it, and making sure we have multiple perspectives and diverse opinions included in those materials.
On that point, just to reinforce the need to continue working on it, I'm just concerned that this is only out of 11 students, that's 5 out of 11 being at or above.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess just to make sure we're still been 4, we've been 36%. So just keep working on that one. Just have such a small sample size that it would be nice to really be confident we're making great progress, but stop somewhere from the low numbers.
Mm-hmm. So socioeconomic status, this is again areas where we've been focusing a little bit around how to better serve our students who may need more support in order to be successful. So the way this works is this is the district, this is the county, and this is the state. Sorry, my labels went away. So this is district, low and non-low. This is county low and non-low. This is state low and non-low scores.
Are there overlaps in these categories?
No, these are unduplicated. They count once. Mm-hmm.
How do we decide what category?
We don't. The state does. And socioeconomic status trumps. Mm-hmm. So this is an area where, as you can see, we've been working. There's been times when we have been below the state. This is the only category really that we've fallen below the state average. This is county, this is state. And again, to Dan's point earlier, it's a pretty low number given the number of students that we have in the district. So really trying to focus on students and building relationships and getting to know each of these students because there's so few of them. We should be able to support them well. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How do you define low socioeconomic?
It's defined by the state, and it's defined by their ability to qualify for the free and/or reduced lunch program. Mm-hmm. So again, this is special ed. So these kind of got screwed up. So this is not the district over here. I know it looks like it, but that's that tile. So this is our district. This is TAM district, general ed students and special ed students. This is the county, general ed students and special ed students. And this is the state, general ed and special ed students. And again, here is the here's our English language learner breakdown, which was an interesting metric this year. But so the way this works is English learners, those are newly classified new arrivals or just in their first phase of learning English. English only in this case, and this is again a title that the state gives us, it's everyone else. So if you're not an English language learner, you're considered English only in this category. So basically all of our gen ed students are in there. And then initially proficient and reclassified. This was an interesting combination, right? Because usually reclassified students would be considered a little further along in their English development. So for our initially proficient to have scored significantly better, again, these are very small numbers of students. We have fewer than 100 English language learners in the entire district. But we do have a robust program to support all of our students, and we've seen increased achievement given our new supports that started about 3 years ago.
So if someone's in the English learner status,
Mm-hmm.
there as long as they also don't.
Correct.
Because there might be some overlaps with some other categories.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then this is just the same data broken out to show you the numbers. So I couldn't fit the actual ends on the other page. So as you can see, very few. Okay, math. So here are our math scores. Again, to note the jump in Drake, and a job well done to them. The math team really took this task to heart and went back and looked at ways that they could improve the student performance. I think some of it, Maddie might be able to chime in, was interaction with the computer and the program itself. We're finding that with a lot of different areas. You know, they have interim assessments now, but just learning how to use the actual assessment system takes a little bit of time. It's not, I wouldn't call it user-friendly. It's a little, finding the tools, where's the calculator, sometimes there's a split screen and you have to figure out how to navigate the split screen and they scroll separately. So it can be challenging and tiring to just figure out those pieces. So trying to get students prepared to take it in a way that they're not feeling the extra stress of trying to manage the process while also performing. Yeah.
I think it was helping students just sort of we did a little like training session beforehand of how to navigate the platform, but also just seeing that the math teachers cared about this test, I think made students care a lot more than they would have normally. So people were performing perhaps at their more accurate assessments because they realized, oh, my math teacher is telling me this is actually something that matters and something I shouldn't just click random answers on, which people tend to do. So I think that encouraged students to try harder on the assessment.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe this is best left somewhere else, but a student I knew very well because he lived in my home came home and asked, gee, the teacher told us today that we needed to do well on the scores because the district gets more money. Is that true? So it might be good to educate our teachers on the value of the tests and what it really does for the district in general.
Okay. Yeah.
I just could be confused. They could be the same thing. Is this the same as the CASP test?
It is the CASP.
Okay, so those
yeah.
it's Smarter Balance
CASP,
or CASP, like they're the same.
So
same
CASP
thing?
is an assessment within the Smarter Balance system.
Okay, but so they're referring to the same. Okay.
Same thing. So here are the claim areas in math. So again, this is percent below standard. This is at or near standard, and this is above standard. So again, I know that we've been doing work here. A few years ago, this was a number that was much higher than we wanted it to be. And again, here's what a claim area, this is the concepts and procedure claim area rubric. So here's the breakdown by ethnicity. So a little bit of a up and down here, but an improvement from here. Obviously, one of our goals is to improve the achievement of all students while narrowing our gaps. So that's something we need to look at too, as to why, why some of our, why some of our groups have dropped or gone sort of up and down. Is something we're going to take a closer look at this year. So here's socioeconomic status. Again, this is district, county, and state. By special education. This is the state over here. This is non-special ed, and this is special ed. And then here's the EL proficiency in math. So Leslie, on this one here, this is standard nearly met, and then this is standard not met. And then here is standard exceeded, standard met, standard nearly met, and standard not met. So we continue to have work to do in our math. So our SAT scores, sure.
We're on it. And I know you have some takeaways at the end, but it looks as if we are doing okay compared to Marin County, compared to the state.
Yes.
in most categories. And I'm going to get a pitch in to, you always take tests seriously. And I hope that message is clear on every campus, because we are looking at the results right now to, and I presume that the sites are too, to help guide their instruction, right?
Right.
They're not assessments of how smart someone is, but are there areas that need to be worked on? You pointed out that Drake had low scores in math a year ago. Focus was made about working with the computer, taking it seriously, teachers, students responding how much their teachers cared. So I hope that message is consistent on every campus, that this is not a mail-it-in effort, because we use it to then make assumptions about curriculum and areas of focus, which is spending money. So they actually are very important test results.
And I think it's, the purpose of the CAS for Smarter Balance is college readiness, college and career readiness. So it also gives us an indication of how well we're doing. We don't have a lot of common assessments around that. So this idea that it does give us some road mapping of like, are we doing well? Are we preparing our students well as we want to, as well as we believe they deserve to be prepared? And so that is, sort of the gravity of this test, is it does give us that data.
Was this the same test that for a few years there we were really working on participation?
Yes.
Right. So it's not only trying to
Right.
make students see how important it is and have a consistent message, but
Yeah.
we've also improved with participation.
We have. We've met. I didn't even put the participation rates in here because
Yeah.
it hasn't been a problem for the last 3 years.
Yeah, and I remember Tam
We've met
started
them.
having pizza, and they did whatever they had to. But my point before wasn't that it had to do with our spending money. It was a perception that the
Oh, no, I
state
know.
would give us money.
Right, yeah.
And so
I'm
just
guessing
having,
that teacher was trying to
who
pull one
knows?
over.
I don't know. So anyway,
Yeah.
I'm kind of echoing what
Yeah.
Cynthia said. I just wanted to clarify. I didn't mean to imply that
Yeah.
it had to do with our budget. It was really that we would get more money. So.
And the truth is that these scores are public, and people do look at them, and schools do look at them and compare. I mean, and I know that I do. I look up Acalanes, I look up Mountain View, I look up Los Altos. We look up how those places are doing as a way to see how are we measuring up. And I know that if I'm doing that, UC's, CSUs are doing that. They're looking at the overall caliber of education, and this is one measure that they know is consistent. GPAs are all over the place, but this is a measure that they know is the same across all of those systems.
I was just thinking, I know it was a discussion at TAM this year just with my single math teacher, but I don't think a lot of other teachers had it. I think even if you could come up, I think it was sent out in an email, but even just like a half a sheet blurb being like, what actually is this test? Like, what does this mean? Like, remember those budget cuts? Like, they won't be as extreme if we do better on the test. Kind of like talking about like, or not that,
Right.
but like kind of making it so like kids can process exactly what it is. Because once kids, like when our teacher, like we had to do like a practice sheet for it and no one would do it. And then she was like, hey, like, do you guys understand what this means? She's like, no, like, this shows, like, this, like, is what the state ranks us at. They're like, what? Whoa. Like, just, like, kind of, I don't know if you'd give, I'm assuming you guys tell teachers to tell us what it is, but that doesn't always come through. That I think the more you can tell kids exactly what was going on. I was whispering to Lauren that, like, even if, like, they showed us the stats, be like, look, we really were 4% behind Redwood. Do we really want to be 4% behind Redwood? Like, kids would, like, I don't know what you do.
We found the key.
Yes, but I think just kind of, yeah.
Do we
I think-
tell
Yeah.
Do we tell parents
And parents,
before
yeah.
kids are about to take these tests?
Yeah, we have a letter that we normally send out
I've
every
never
year.
seen it. I've had 2 kids
You've
that have
never
gone
seen
through
the
this
letter?
test. Yeah.
Oh, I'll talk to them. Yeah.
I mean, if you really want to, in my opinion, if it's one thing for teachers to tell kids to care, but where the rubber hits the pavement is making parents make their kids
Yeah.
care.
Huh. You've never. So we do
Yeah,
normally
I've never seen
send
it.
an email that because parents have the option to opt a student out.
I kind of nerd out and read all the district emails, and I've never seen one.
Well, it usually comes from the site, so I'll find
Yeah.
out.
Okay.
Usually, try to divvy up whether or not parents are going to read it if it comes from me, or better read it if it comes from the principal. My money's on the principals. But that's a good point. We'll make sure that the letters get out so that parents know. So here are our SATs for our 2019 graduates. Pretty straightforward. The SAT has also changed in the last several years. and is also meant to be, I think originally the SAT was meant to sort of, it was supposed to be predictive of success, like how well will the student do as a sophomore in college, and now it is really moving more towards prepared for college. Mm-hmm. So again, strong data, and to note that not all kids obviously take the SAT. This is part of the, there is a bill making its way through the state legislature to allow districts to substitute the SAT for the CASP test. My understanding is that bill's not likely to make it far now. Dr. Linda Darling-Hammond is not in favor of it, and in fact, she is pushing to have the CSUs and CUs drop the SAT and ACT and use the CASP as the standardized measure, which would certainly change the the participation and engagement level, I think. But that conversation is just sort of, it's very nascent, so we'll see where that conversation goes. And these are our ACT scores. Yep.
Difference in the reading and the math on the ACT, whereas they were virtually identical on the SAT.
Yeah. This one. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And some of that is because there's more reading on the ACT, so on the math, it may get in the way of people solving the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard that observation also. So our AP scores, so we had 1,600 students take at least one exam. So here are the, so this is just all the exams together. The spreadsheet of like breakout of the exams is not possible to actually show in an overhead. So I did it this way instead. But about an 83.5% pass, AP, for the College Board, AP a 3 or over is considered passing. Schools can determine what they will take. Some schools, I went to a small college in Maine, and they said, that's great, we don't care. Yeah, well done, you. You're still taking English 1. But they did give me credit. So for all of the AP tests that I earned a 3 or higher on, they gave me 3 credits, which was nice. But then I had to take the class. So some places they substitute the class out. It just depends. So it's something that is college specific as to how they see it. But a 3 is considered passing. So make sure when you're applying to colleges you look at how they take your APs. So one thing I do want to say here is an area that we're really trying to focus on is representation. Our African American and Latinx students in particular, as well as our low SES students, are very underrepresented in our AP courses and our advanced classes in general. So we are looking at barriers, like what are the barriers to taking those classes? Is it an access issue? And how can we help the AP, all of our students have access to these courses so that our APs are representative of our student body? And that's a goal of ours moving forward. And it's sort of right now varying degrees of ways of getting into AP. Some it's open access, some it's not. Yeah.
I was just curious, this could have been just like a site discussion, but I believe it was like middle of last year, there was discussion, it could have just been by the TAM English department, of talking about making AP comp mandatory for all juniors.
Juniors,
Was that a district discussion or just a
No,
us
that was a
discussion?
site-based discussion, but I believe Drake has sort of started around the fringes of that conversation too. Interestingly, far more students at TAM take AP Comp than at the other sites, even than Redwood. So it seems to be a little bit more site-specific.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. But anyway, I think this is an area that's within our locus of control where we can provide greater access and support for all students. You know, there's data that show that a student that takes just one advanced class has a much higher success rate in college, a much higher chance of matriculating into college and being successful once there. So it's a focus of ours.
In some ways, I think this probably understates the challenge and courses students take in the 32%, that's some of the overall enrollment, whereas most freshmen would be taking them. So this
Right.
senior.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you look at just juniors and seniors, you're closer to 50 to 55% of the juniors and seniors taking at least one. Yes.
And is that pretty much square with the people that take the class? Because that's the percent of people that take exams, but you're not required to take, you can't require a student to take an exam that we don't pay for.
Right. Yes, it's pretty close. Most of the kids who take our classes take the exam. It's a fairly close. Okay, so some observations. Some of these are not new. Our African American students this is their 4th consecutive year of improved achievement, particularly in ELA. Unfortunately, we dropped a little in math in that group, so that was unfortunate this year. But in general, our focus areas did improve slightly. We'd like to see greater improvement. I do think I have seen and I have observed a shift in mindset since we really started focusing 4 years ago on the racial consciousness work and what it means and how much identity matters. And that honoring the identity of the students in your room impacts how well they will learn. And that has been what I have seen some of the biggest movement in the district, is gaining that level of understanding of why it's important. And we continue to offer the Beyond Diversity workshops. We just sent out another round of signups. We have another 30 people already signed up. We have some parent ed workshops coming up. There's one on October 2nd at Kentfield from 6 to 7:30 or so. I'm going to send it out in my newsletter tomorrow. There's also a one-day workshop for community members on October 3rd at MCOE, and that's $50, and it's sort of an introduction, but it's longer. It's like 8:30 to 3:30. So I encourage anyone. It's a really powerful workshop, and it's the SOAR work that the students were referencing. That's the same work. It's the same organization. The SOAR students on Friday went through the Beyond Diversity workshop. So areas of growth. As I said, we're doing okay. I think we're better than the scores that we are posting. So I'd like to see stronger improvement in those areas. I would like to see narrowing of our gaps without any one group lowering. I'd like to see everybody improving. So that's, again, it will remain one of our strong focus, that improving the learning of all students. Again, that a lot of that has to do with the climate and culture in which the learning takes place.
Why do you say that you think that we're doing better than the scores reflect?
I think if you look at our SAT and ACT scores, they're stronger than the national and state averages. So I think that indicates that we probably are stronger than our scores are on the CASP are representing. When you look at our general GPAs, when you look at where students are matriculating. We have strong students. I think we could post better scores.
And just anecdotally, from talking to students after they take the test, reading is a very different process on the computer. It doesn't matter how much you practice for it, and if there's reading that goes along with the math problems as well.
Yep.
It's very different to do that on the computer and less interactive, and kids struggle to take notes, right, to solve the math problem. So it's actually a very artificial way of doing the test.
No, that I can definitely, I can see that.
Yeah, so I think, San Andreas is an area where we've, David Luongo in particular has been doing a lot of wonderful work over there, and all the staff over there. I think the culture and climate of that school has improved, and it's a really great place. Hopefully all board members will get an opportunity to visit it. And we do continue to struggle. They have an overrepresentation of our low SES students as well as our special ed students. So their scores tend to be lower, but they have a higher concentration of students who struggle on these tests. And an area of growth is to disrupt the data. The data has been very consistent within our district for a long time. So just a reminder, looking at our primary LCAP goal of improving the learning of all students while narrowing our achievement and opportunity gaps. So I think it's, why is the test important, but why is student achievement important? And why is it that we want to focus on all students? And what does it matter? Because, in the past we have had conversations of in a district like ours that is largely white and not low SES, when you look at data in the aggregate, we look really good, right? And it can be easy to sit on those laurels and say, we're doing a great job, and we are doing a good job with most of our students, but we need to do a great job with all of our students. And the implications are huge for students who don't get a strong education in high school. So I just wanted to share some data. The remediation is an absolute death knell. Students who enter needing to remediate it's just such an uphill battle to make it through the classes and then to actually make it into credit earning classes. It costs money for them, it costs time, and it's very difficult to be persistent through those. So the goal of making sure our students leave here prepared, that's why, so that they can choose to go into community college, a four-year college, and not have to remediate any class is an absolute necessity for our students. And then, as we know, in this county, it's becoming more and more difficult. We're having a lot of conversation at the county level around housing availability, and housing affordability, particularly for teachers, and for professionals. It's getting very difficult. People are getting priced out. And when you look at some of the statistics around earning potential, it is nearly impossible to actually live in this county and not have earned at least a community college degree. So this is, when we say an opportunity gap, right? When you don't even have the opportunity to apply because you haven't met the coursework. That is, that's money, that's time, that's opportunity to succeed, and to have access to higher paying jobs, have access to jobs that provide benefits and health care. All of that stems from readiness and opportunity to participate in our higher education systems.
That fact, is that nationwide?
This is nationwide. So while we're seeing an increase in participation, degrees are still not representative. And that again is a problem. When we think about the cost of college and the debt that students often incur in college, to then not complete it and have a degree doesn't help you as far as employment opportunities, and again, opportunities to participate in jobs that will provide, comfortable life where you don't have to worry about health care and other benefits. I think this middle bullet is really interesting. I think we're seeing the real benefits of providing not just academic support, but social emotional support. We're really, back to my comment about students really needing to feel included and welcomed and safe in a space where they're learning. We know so much more about the brain and how we learn, and that we just can't learn in a space. And it's not that we don't want to, you physically can't. Right? It's an impossibility. Your brain is not going to take in information if you're in a constant state of unsafety. So this is just the unemployment rates and earnings by educational attainment. This was from 2018. I think it's probably the most sort of clear demonstration of why it's important that students have the opportunity to earn a college degree. And also, not to just be economic about it, but that full participation in our democracy, small d democracy, requires analytical skills. It requires that you be able to take in information, analyze it. Particularly today, we have access to so much information that it can be really hard to navigate and figure out where is this information coming from, how accurate is it, and also to challenge systems that are unjust or inequitable. That takes skills. It takes speaking skills. It takes analytical skills. It's not just economic. It's about quality of life and ability to participate and influence your life and exercise your agency. So, some of our next steps. Our site teams will have this data, as we did in years past, take it out to our departments to analyze it a little more deeply, as we've seen math and English do in the past. Look at those claim areas. Where are our students not sort of hitting the mark that we want to, and do some very focused work. Luckily, we have both an English and a math task force, as well as a social studies task force, so that work can be held by those departments. I think we really need to continue to look at our policies and practices as they relate to access to classes and opportunities to be successful in those classes. I think we've seen some recent programming and things put in place that are starting to see real promise, and that the Success Network program at TAM, which is essentially, one person who is tracking some of our highest needs students on a weekly basis and sharing data around attendance, around work completion, test scores, with our community-based organizations such as 10,000 Degrees, Bridge the Gap, speaking with the counselors, speaking with the admin team, speaking with BACR, and making sure that these students have access to the resources they need. And if they're not connected with a community-based organization or somebody at the site, making that connection and making sure they know those connections are available. So that's something that we're looking to be able to replicate across our sites. I think some more steps with data is looking deeper into some of our SAT and ACT data to see where there's alignment or misalignment. And these last two are recommendations from me to the board, is that I think we need a specific equity policy. I think having something that is actually a statement from the board that says these are important goals to have, not just in our LCAP, but actually in policy. And I think with that, it's probably time that we look at rewriting the mission. Our mission is now 10 years old. I can't help but think our data hasn't changed in 10 years, and maybe it's time. Yeah, maybe it's time to adjust some other things. People do look to the mission to guide our work, and it's important. Questions? Mm-hmm.
Didn't go on. I have a question. With regard to race or ethnicity, is that something that is self-reported by the students?
Yes.
So if they put down African American, white, and Asian, where do they end up in that category?
I don't know that you can. I'll have to. So on our CASP,
Yeah.
the data is collected at the state level. So it's actually when they're first enrolled in school and when their parents fill it out. So there is a multi or more than one race category that people can check to. But I don't believe you can check more than one box. You know, so there's one that says more than one race, and then there's other, and then decline to state.
Oh.
Yeah.
I have a question about AP tests.
Mm-hmm.
I know this year the college board is making students commit much earlier.
Yeah.
Registering and paying for these tests. So, I mean, can the district do anything to like anticipate lower registration rates? Commit so early?
No, you know, it's, you know, we usually have, like I said, most kids in our district take the test. Yeah, I mean, I don't know enough about why they've moved it. They can. I don't want to get into conjecture on it. I think it's a little hard for us, but to comment on that. Mm-hmm. Other questions?
Any public comment? No, thank you, Tara. That was very good work.
Can I just,
Oh, yeah,
I
absolutely.
want to sort of tip my hat to Dr. Topier. I really appreciate you recognizing that while we are improving, to the point that you made to not rest on our laurels, because we do live in somewhat of a bubble, and there are still major gaps, and I so appreciate you recognizing them and driving an agenda that will help close those gaps. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Should be hesitant to say this, but I think that it's also concerning that if we look at the overall results, much of it is driven by the demographic mix rather than just overall achievement, and that if we look at non-low SES, it's pretty consistent with other areas, and so for everyone, we could have a little more sort of hunger and achievement with that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Absolutely. We'll recess. Okay, recess is over. We'll now move on to the agenda item B with Corbett Elson, discuss global studies, Tahiti and Belize field trips.
All right, so good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
For the next two agenda items, I thought I'd provide a little bit of context, just as a reminder. But for at the last board meeting, we discussed the upcoming two agenda items. So since then, I've received feedback from the board. Dr. Topi and I received that feedback. We made changes to what you're seeing in front of you tonight in the next two agenda items. The super waivers for the respective trips and the quote-unquote disclosures and rules for each trip, and with the board policy as well. We ran that feedback by our legal counsel to get an eye and feedback on that, and that's what you see before you. So at the pleasure of the board, I'd like to take one item at a time, review that, see if there's any further feedback. Since the posting on Friday, I have one already additional piece update that's going to be presented to you tonight on that and is available to the public in the back. So Mary, if you would, maybe we can start with Tahiti first, and if you would, with the super waiver. We can put me on 3 minutes. All right, a little degree of difficulty.
Mary's decided you get 3 minutes.
Kick it up a notch. Yeah, that's right. Great. So if you would, I guess, scroll down to the second page, one piece I want to highlight, right there, Mary, are the last two bullets in the bottom. These are changes, so everything else is the same other than what I'm going to highlight, if you will. So the two bottoms on the two bullets on the bottom that you see there are edits from the feedback we received at the last board meeting. All swimming is strictly prohibited except for organized group swim activities with the presence of appropriate adult chaperone and lifeguards. And the bottom bullet point is a tweak. While the district shall ensure the presence of a certified lifeguard at prearranged group swim activities, parents are on notice that there are no certified lifeguards at any public beaches or bodies of water in TD/French Polynesia. So I just want to highlight that came directly from feedback from the board at the last meeting. I don't believe, unless I'm mistaken, if there's any other feedback on this document, but I'll pause to see if there's any other questions before moving to the disclosures and rules.
I wonder if it should say, and this is not feedback that I gave at the last meeting, right? I mean, because this is consistent.
But please,
Right.
more, yeah.
But if we should add to that last bullet point, while the district shall ensure the presence of a certified lifeguard at prearranged and permissible, right? Because it's not that it's prearranged, it's one of the permissible activities, which is, I don't know what people feel about that, but that could just be a lawyer being paranoid.
Oh, here's an engineer being paranoid. The part that I'm sorry, I didn't bring this up last time either, and it's I'm sure there's probably maybe it's just the format, but on the first page, under background facts and risks, I understand in concept why we say, in addition, while traveling with a host family, your student may, and then it goes on to explain all sorts of activities, and it includes your child may also be swimming in natural man-made pools, blah, 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 blah. And then it just stops there. And then the next one at the bottom under summary, it talks about certified lifeguard as part of one of the district, that we will provide that for and then it lists activities that someone could read it and think that applies to the second paragraph under that section. And then the second to last bullet, it says all swimming is strictly prohibited except for organized group swim activities. So we're saying everything is prohibited, but then the first page we say, but they may be doing these activities. And I understand the intent. We're kind of acknowledging that they may choose to do this on their own risk, but I'm wondering if it's worth having some sort of clarifying statement in there referring the reader to the other section. I don't know. if I were a parent, because I think it could be confusing. I don't know.
Okay.
What do you think, since you grew up reading these documents?
No, I looked at that too, and I thought the overall was, it's clearly old language, right? I mean, that was the original language we started with, but that's the broad umbrella of what you might be doing, and then it gets to the specifics of how you would do that in the later paragraph. So if you are doing swimming, it is only on a prearranged with a lifeguard.
But then it says, while traveling with your host's family, your child may also be swimming. So it seems as though in the same paragraph we should make it clear, but we actually prohibit it, but you may be doing it with your host family. I think it's...
Okay, well then maybe that does need to be cleared up, because I thought how we left at the last meeting was that these instructions would go to the host family, so the host family is not to engage in activities that they've done with in the past, unless it's a group activity. Isn't that what we were discussing?
Yeah, except here, this is for right here. See, the way this reads, and then we go on to prohibit it on the second page. And then here we say in summary. Well, this doesn't sound like a summary to me. It just seems a little
I think
awkward.
I understand if I see which paragraph you're referencing there. I think it's the first page.
Paragraph. First page,
Yep.
second paragraph under the Yeah.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, I think the intent that Trustee Ronish mentioned is correct, and I understand your point. So if I could, we could strike that your child may be also swimming because it's in the context of the first sentence, traveling with the host family, which is, I believe, the point you're making.
Yeah,
if I'm hearing
that
you
it makes
correctly.
it sound like with your host family, you may be also swimming. Yeah.
So might a
just clear that up.
suggestion, and I'm open to the will of the board, to avoid that confusion, given, like you stated, Leslie, later on in the document, it states very clearly what swimming activities are allowed. Might we, in the paragraph referencing, strike the reference to swimming? Your child may also be swimming in natural and man-made pools. It's tempting, I could strike that from it to avoid that confusion. Or any other suggestions?
Yeah, I think maybe you're right. Maybe that's what it is, because we switch back and forth, because then it says your child may also be taking a ferry in the open sea. And that is a district activity, right?
Correct.
And so then we go from host to district to host. And so I think that's where, and that was so much of what our concern was, is that we're relying on the host family. Oh, but then the next paragraph, it just seems like it gets repetitive. So then the next paragraph says, along with district staff, your child will travel.
Can I make a suggestion? I think we can strike the swimming in that paragraph. I'm worried that we're trying to wordsmith to the point where we're going to be completely trying to outline. I think we need to outline what is and is not prohibited. And I think that's the clearest way to do this. Like, I think take out any reference to swimming that isn't just the only swimming will be happening in these organized events where the lifeguard is present and district staff. I think we're trying to cover and inform the parents of everything that the host family might do. I'm worried because there could be things on there that we don't know they're going to do. I just don't, and I'm
so
not sure.
So if we want them to say that the host family might go swimming, then say it, but that they're not, we're not approving that they go swimming.
Yeah,
that was my point, was
I
that
think
if I were a parent, I'd read that and think, well, they said that they're going to have supervision, and they said over here that's prohibited not to, and up here they say they're going to do it. So,
so I think we can change that to your child may go to the beach or ocean while exploring fauna and flora of the lagoons.
Striking the also be swimming in natural and man-made pools.
Because I think we try to state very clearly that the only swimming will be in the organized, prearranged.
What Dr. Tobey recommended is what I was attempting to try to recommend.
Right.
To address
Okay.
your concern, Leslie.
Okay, thanks. Do other board members agree with that, or no? Okay.
If I could, I want to go back to Cynthia's feedback and just make your comment. I think there's no harm in that. I think it adds some value. So the add and permissible piece, I'd just like to see if that's the will of the group.
Yeah, prearranged / permissible.
Yes,
it doesn't have to, it's just.
Okay.
It leaves less room for interpretation.
Which is good. Shall I include that?
I'm fine with that. I have no strong opinion either way, so
Okay.
good. It looks like everybody else is nodding also.
So outside of the two edits we just talked about, is there any other feedback on this document before we move on?
I have no feedback. Do you, student trustees? Do you have any feedback on the agreement? Thanks.
Very good. Yes, so if you would, the second document that Mary has put up is the activities disclosure and rules of conduct for Tahiti. This came from board direction last meeting. This is a very specific subset of the information in the waiver. It's consistent with that, so this is a new document to you, but the content should look very familiar at this point. Is there any feedback or comments?
And does this also has that same paragraph towards the end?
The same one that we were talking about
About
with,
the arranged swimming, the lifeguard, or, yeah.
Yep.
Because 3 of the documents have it and 1 does not. So they're, okay, so all
Was the
swimming.
yeah.
Well,
So,
this-
okay, so both the Tahiti documents have that, all swimming trips strictly prohibited except,
and permissible.
yes.
Okay.
That's fine.
Anything else, anyone? Okay, good. Looks
Good.
like we can move on to the,
Okay. Shall we move
Belize.
on to Belize?
yes.
Before, I want to make, as a foreshadow the beginning of the agenda item, based on some board feedback from what was posted on Friday to now, Mary has an updated version with an additional bullet point. So Mary, if you wouldn't mind. check-
The one here I was trying to pull up before.
Great. I believe that is it. So I want to scroll down to the addition that, otherwise everything's the same. Mary, if you would, scroll down to the second page, please. There you go. If you would, stop. Oh, a little bit higher. I apologize. It was actually the bottom of the first page. There you go. The second bullet point from the bottom was not on the original document that was posted, although it was referenced in the rules and disclosures. It was an omission. The bullet point, all swimming is strictly prohibited except for organized group swim activities and the presence of adult chaperones and lifeguards. That was the intent, I believe, of the board. That was in the rules and the disclosure document, and also in the Tahiti. So that is the lone addition from what was posted on Friday,
Okay.
and a copy of this is made available in the back. I don't believe I have any other updates or from the board from last board meeting. So any comments or questions on this?
Anyone have any comments, questions? Students, no? Okay.
And obviously, as Cynthia mentioned, I'll add the and permissible piece. Okay. Given that, then, Mary, if you would, I believe you're moving on to the, let's see, disclosure and rules of conduct for Belize. And again, much like the Tahiti piece, this is a subset. Nothing is changed from here. No updates from Friday. This is simply a subset of what you saw last time in the super waiver. Any questions or comments?
No. Kevin? No?
Great.
No, I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you. Leslie, if I would, before we move on to the next agenda item, I guess a question I have is, outside of the edits we talked about, would the board like to see this again with those updates, or are we far enough along knowing that we'll move forward with the edits we've agreed upon?
And when you say move forward, bring it back for us to approve it? Or you're just saying we approve it now? I just want some clarity. Sometimes you bring it back and we don't, it's on the consent calendar, for instance, after we've.
It's obviously the board's discretion what your comfort level is. That being said, I don't see any need to bring it back. It doesn't technically
Right,
need
I'm-
board approval.
No, I'm fine, Tara. I just wanted to make sure because there's other times when you've said that and you've meant bring it back to be on the consent, and we've sometimes, and so I just want to be clear what you're asking.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So it's obviously again the board's discretion, but
Right.
I don't see any need to bring it back formally on consent nor in discussion.
Right.
Unless you all do or Dr. Tope does.
Nope, okay. No, I'm good.
I'm fine.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. So
No, thank you.
Yeah.
very good.
You don't want to discuss this?
I'm ready for the next agenda item if you are.
Okay, great. And now I think we're on to the whole enchilada here with the actual AR here. Let's see here. Yep. Action on revision to admin regulation, district-sponsored trips.
Great. Thank you. So again, much like the last board meeting, this is an update of the proposed AR with some edits from last board meeting. Dr. Tope and I reviewed that feedback from the board and also ran that by legal. Before I review the changes, and Mary, maybe you could prep the red line version, please. It's easier to see those changes. I thought I'd just provide a little bit of context and maybe context for this discussion to consider. Obviously, we've been talking about this board policy in context of 2 specific trips, but my recommendation would be that we think about, we lean into this further about the future of where we want this to be. Obviously, we're cleaning up a situation that was less than ideal, and I don't want to be in this situation again, and nor does the board. So my food for thought in terms of the context of the conversation we're about to have is that we're obviously, some of these field trips are planned well in advance. In fact, field trips for next school year are often planned and communicated with families and parents as early as March of this year. So something to think about. We're going to have we always have full board agenda items. If there's what we're considering tonight, while there's some changes, that doesn't preclude us from making further changes this spring. But it might be helpful to get some direction from the board on how I might manage expectations with staff going into the spring for next school year. Whether it's related to the saltwater activities in these 2 trips, kayaking, that might help get in front of it and buy us time to have the conversations as a board, but also get in front of any pre-planning that might occur with the staff. So that's one thing to think about in context before we look at this board policy. So with that, I think, Mary, you got the red line version, or blue in this case. Can't tell where you are, Mary. If you don't mind, do you mind going to the top just so I can see the context of where? Thank you. And then if you would, then scroll down to the blue. I'd appreciate it. There you are. So I'm going to highlight the blue specific pieces based on feedback. You'll see in the top, specific to only. So the intent of adding the word only is to make the changes we're looking at narrow and specific to the global studies only trips. So that's the purpose of that word only. There's some references to global studies field trips having a ratio of 12:1, but the unless otherwise prescribed in this regulation based on activities is making that defined to the fact that in swimming, we have a very clear policy of 10:1 ratios. So that's the intent of those 2 changes, is to make this specific to that. Next down, the second blue paragraph. Feedback from the board was to define what we mean by adult chaperones. So adult chaperones are required to be in all trips at the appropriate supervision ratios specific to the field trip activities outlined in this AR. Adult chaperones are inclusive of the required teachers or certificated personnel. That could include counselors. Those are certificated personnel. Technically, it could be administrators with that credential as well. And other qualified adults physically present during field trip activities under contract with the district to provide additional supervision. That was based on the fact with the Belize trip, we'll have some additional contracted supervisors on that trip. So that was an attempt to be inclusive of adult chaperones. Moving down to the third one at the very top that Mary has, I've added the use of nicotine products per board feedback. To make that broad. I don't want to use any particular narrow term. We want to use a broader term to cover the bases given names and language can change. And then scrolling down further, I don't see any other changes I'm aware of. Oh, there we go. So the following water activities are prohibited by board policy as the context for this change. 1, swimming in the ocean or bay or other non-supervised bodies of water. So that's nothing new. What is new is the blue piece. With the exception of global studies field trips involving swimming in the ocean or bay, compliant with all lifeguard requirements referenced in this AR. So again, it's trying to keep this, what we're talking about, these 2 trips, that is the specific piece we're trying to change this AR to address, but to not make it too broad that would allow for other potential swimming in the ocean or bay, which I believe is not the intent of the board to look at this time. So that's to keep it narrow, specific to the context of what we're talking about. And then Mary, if you would scroll down a little bit, there you go. Go a little bit higher if you would, Mary, please. There we go. So C is the use of natural or engineered outdoor swim activities with facilities, I should say, with some examples there. Reservoirs, lakes, ponds are expressly available to the public for swimming purposes, which conform to the following. We added the piece at number 4. Lifeguard on duty is nothing new, or accompanying students throughout the duration of the swim activity. I believe the intent of that is lifeguard on duty can sometimes refer to a lifeguard may be physically employed by a public beach. The intent of that is we may have, in these cases, lifeguards who are also adult chaperones or employees. So they're accompanying students throughout the duration of the swim activity. And number 5, which is new, when in the ocean or bay only on global studies field trips involving swimming in the ocean and bay. Again, being clear, we're keeping this narrow, the ocean and bay swimming, to these global studies field trips only. That may have been redundant as I said out loud, but I wanted to err on the side of detail. I believe that's all the changes that we're proposing compared to last time. Any comments or questions?
So I agree with the changes on pages 1 through 4.
Okay.
And on page 5, the first change, swimming in the ocean or bay, with the exception of global, is prohibited, right? But I think we contradict ourselves or make it very murky when we get down to 2C, because 2C says use of natural or engineered outdoor swim facilities, which includes the bay and ocean, and then we just exclude it when we get to 5. So it's confusing. And I know we heard that at least San Andreas does a trip to Stinson Beach. They do a field trip to Stinson Beach. Sounds like they actually swim at Stinson Beach. I don't know that, but just from the student saying, would that trip be prohibited? And I think the intent of the board is to prohibit the use of the ocean, lifeguard or not, except on the global studies trips. And I don't know that that's clear with C.
With 2C, yep.
Yes, with 2C.
That's something we struggle with as well. The other word we looked at in terms of in place of natural was the word fresh water, non-salt water, non-ocean, non-bay. But I agree with you, Cynthia, that there could be some improvement in language there. Those are two phrasings we were wrestling with.
Would freshwater satisfy that, Cynthia? Replace natural with freshwater?
I think it would, but I guess maybe back up. So I guess maybe I have a bigger question. We've allowed swimming in rivers? I mean, is that one of the purposes? Like, I thought the remembering back from, I don't know what version we were looking at, I thought it was more like pool facilities that were being used for swimming. And things like oceans and moving water were not in the activities. Is that? But I don't know the history of the district. I mean, so like you go to the American River and swim in the rapids. We can't whitewater raft, but we can go up there with a lifeguard and kids swim in the rapids.
I can't think of specific field trips off the top of my head that did that, but my understanding of the policy was that it was permissible. Tara and Lars, please jump in if otherwise, but I believe that was.
Yeah, that language is not new. That's language that's been in there. So, yeah. I can't think of any field trip. I don't think team does. I don't think they swim on any of their trips. And I have not seen a field trip that had that in there, but that's been part of the policy.
That's my understanding.
So I think freshwater would take care of it. This just looks cumbersome, but for purposes of time, that seems to take care of it.
I think, too, that if indeed a teacher, or I would hope that if indeed a teacher came to the site principal with a request to go on a whitewater rapid swim trip, that the principal would know enough to deny that request, right? So if what you just said, right, we can't go whitewater river rafting, but does this language allow us to go swimming in those those rapids?
I don't think it's your point. Whitewater rafting is one that specifically prohibited activities, so kind of maybe.
Understand that.
Yep,
But Cynthia was saying, does that mean that we could go swimming there with a lifeguard? Well, so yes, this would allow that, but we would never get past the approval process, right?
Yeah, I mean,
High risk comes to the board, right?
yeah, high risk
exactly.
comes to the board.
Okay, well,
you know,
but my point is that, yeah.
Yeah, and
high risk.
I think the free from posted warnings that would preclude use by students
Right.
is also some language that tries to get at risky conditions.
Got it. Good then.
Cynthia, what we talked about in 2C, did that, if we change the word natural from use of natural to use of fresh water, does the rest of that piece fit it? Clear up some of your murkiness?
It does, but then number 5 doesn't fit in that category. Right? That's the thing, is we've brought back in ocean into a category that says no ocean. And so that's what's making this unclear. And you want to be as clear as possible. So if someone's doing an activity on a approved field trip. And so
And remind me, this is part of the struggle we had of how to organize it.
Right.
It's still a number 1 though.
Yeah, I
Right,
know,
so
but
that
this is
point is
part
made.
of this, but then we get into another section of 1. This is part of the problem, is we don't have these sections labeled by letters, by Roman numerals, right? So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, then we have a paragraph that's not numbered, and then we go 1, 2, A, B, C, right? So it's there's no subparts of things, right? They're all independent parts, and then contradictory.
But at the top of page 5, number 1, swimming in the ocean, doesn't that capture what we're trying to say? And then you can actually delete it from the 5 in parentheses?
Down below?
Does it need, because I don't think it belongs there.
So you're saying the one up above would be, because it addresses the specific exception, might that make the 5 below unnecessary?
That's the way.
But it's not, because they both consider swimming. So, right, you've got swimming in the ocean or bay is prohibited except for this, and then these other activities are prohibited. Then no swimming except for signs. Right, and then it's another category of swimming. So it could be that just by labeling them, Roman numeral 1. I don't. I'm not going to do it right now, but it's unclear the way it is.
Okay. I see that dilemma. It's the 2C number 5 combo and how it's organized.
Right. And maybe we just take it out and then it's apparent, but we still have 2 categories labeled swimming.
So this is an action item, so how should we proceed? What is the drop dead date? And then do we have time to make further revisions and bring it back to the board for the next meeting? Is that workable?
Yeah, of course. I think, want to get the policy right. Where we're at, just in terms of a practicality piece, the fact that we got direction in the previous agenda item is very helpful for moving forward from a practical point of view. Tentatively, pending what just occurred the last agenda item, Mike Levinson was planning on meeting on Monday evening, this upcoming Monday evening, with with parents to have an informational meeting, potentially, pending the outcome of tonight. The Tahiti trip is having an informational meeting in a couple of weeks, tentatively, pending the outcome of tonight. I wouldn't bring forward the formal request for board approval on these 2 specific field trips until we have clarity, or an update of a board policy. So I believe I can take the feedback on this, it's open to the board, I can take the feedback on the policy that was provided tonight in those 2 items, work on that with Dr. Topi and legal to try to address that and bring it back to the next board meeting. As long as the board is comfortable with me in parallel giving direction to the Belize group to continue with their informational meetings on the super waivers and the rules and disclosures inclusive of the updates. So I'm comfortable with that if Dr. Topi and the board is comfortable with that.
I'm comfortable with that because the intent is the same. It's just the way this is worded on page 5, right? So the intent is that ocean swimming is to be prearranged on the global studies trips with the ratio of 10-to-1 with lifeguards on duty, and swimming in the ocean and open water is not to occur except in those activities. And then it's how do we get that to be accurately reflected in the board policy. And there's just a little confusion right now in the way that it's labeled in 2 different sections of swimming, one that's prohibited, but then it seems it's allowed in the next section if it's the global studies trip. So for me, it's a matter of formatting, really, to clear it up in the policy.
Yeah, I think it is, because I think where this came from was a previous conversation of saying it's prohibited, like that we didn't put the exclusion in the prohibit. Does that make sense? Do you know what I mean? Because we didn't call out the global studies as being allowed.
Yeah.
That's why we added it in there.
Right.
So I totally get it, that it says, well, why do we have this where we say we can't have it? And I think we did it because before we said, well, up here we're saying you can go, but down here we're saying you can't swim in the ocean at all. Right? I know that's kind of a pinball to follow, but.
We're trying to narrow it to,
Yeah.
to what
And
the
I get it,
intent
because
is.
we're trying to make sure that our policy is consistent throughout, and that nobody could look at it and say, but here you say no swimming at all in the oceans, right? Which was what we were trying to avoid.
Anyone else? Okay. You good?
And can I just add a comment that I would like it at some point in the future that we are seriously looking at this to see whether these trips continue to be sponsored by the district as opposed to being outsourced to a global studies program, as many of our comparable districts have done, based on, at least my desire for that is based on what responsibilities the district has for them if they're sponsoring them, and then what message are we sending about equity in either accessing the trip or accessing activities on the trip, because swimming still represents a high income activity, and it may dissuade people who are students that we represent from signing up for a trip where swimming is part of it. And then we may still continue to sponsor it, but I would like to have a discussion at some point on that.
And if I would, from a staff perspective,
Right.
just to reiterate what I mentioned before, it'd be, we're going to, before we get too far away from this topic, hopefully in the near future we will, it'd be great to get some direction or guidance of how to advise staff moving forward, given the planning component of the nature of these field trips in the spring. Some more time to come.
So just to follow up, so is this an item that you foresee us making or bringing to the board potentially a decision sometime this year? And so knowing that, when would you need to have that decision for the Global Studies program? How far in advance? I think they do it at least 9 months in advance, actually, if my memory's right.
February?
February.
Yeah, really, February to be comfortable to avoid, February would be ideal.
Yeah.
So it might be something that we start to evaluate. If we can't make the decision in February, we know we have to push it off, and it won't affect the trips during that time, possibly. I'm just throwing ideas out there, but we can at least start the discussion. Because I think it's a valid point, and I want to respect your concerns. And I do have to say this because I can imagine how this latest topic that Cynthia Ronish broached, if it makes it out to the Global Studies program, I can only imagine the response. I am a parent of 2 students that went, and I support Cynthia's concerns. Based on the feedback that we received by the staff in response to questions, it made me get alarmed, and I was always the one that was the biggest supporter in it, and so I think it's completely legitimate. So I just want to say that. Thanks. So we have agreement, we're going to push off the AR, and we're not approving it because we're making these adjustments. Okay, good. Let's see now. Now we're on to the first reading of Board Policy and Admin Regulation 5117. I believe that's Tara.
So these are, this is a revision to the revision of our interdistrict transfer policy and administrative regulation. So in doing a little bit of research, we found some language that we thought was beneficial to put in the policy, to call out specifically that we don't get additional dollars for additional students, and that is a consideration for us. We know particularly right now when we are so full with our own students and that our facilities are at capacity, I think it's important to have something in there that states part of the restriction for us. So that was the addition of that language at the top of the board policy there. We also decided here that we just make it as simple as possible that we do not provide transportation, period. So we went through trying to clarify some of the language. So that's the BP. Other questions on the board policy itself before we look at the AR?
Just as a matter of procedure, when you get requests for interdistrict transfers and we provide information to the families, do we give them a copy of the BP and the AR?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so then we went through the AR. So some of the major changes, just to remind you, is that we have taken the timeline out of the AR and said we will publish the timeline on our website, which we'll do. And then I think if you scroll down, Mary, scroll. There, back, right there. Thank you. So this was some of the major changes. We pretty much ended up striking out almost all of this. To some of the feedback we got, some of the redundancy, and just left 3, which is unchanged, which would apply to a student finishing their senior year and graduating with their class. And then added some clarifying language, which, we saw this in other policies, but this doesn't have to be in there with the, when the parent guardian will be moving into the district within 30 days of the first student attendance day. It's sort of a common policy in other places that we've seen. And so that's some of that new language to clarify, I think, to clarify immediate future, to actually define it. And what I found most commonly was 30 days. Now, questions come up of like, okay, so they have a closing date within 30 days. What if they don't close? Those things come up, so.
And that's the one that struck me going through it. And I think you're always imagining the worst case scenario, right? I mean, that's what lawyers are supposed to do, right? Is supposed to think down the road and say, okay, where's the perfect storm? And so, an executed lease, there's actually no standard for an executed lease, right? You can have someone sign a lease, they're renting, subletting from someone. There's no money that is exchanged. There's nothing, right? And it's just a document that's put together. I guess I would be hesitant to grant the 30-day window. Having done it in other districts before, it's as of, the day that you're living in the district. And it always provides, well, this is a little different because you grant them, but are you saying that you're limited to, so granting or IDTs only based on what's included in the AR?
Yes.
Okay. So you want a definitive list?
Yeah.
Okay.
And for that one on the moving in, we were trying to narrow it to only if it was the start of the school year, so only if you were going to be moving into the district within 30 days of that August 15th date, not, we're moving in January, so we're going to start in December. But the idea would be to allow a student to actually start the school year in the district in which they'd be living.
And then what would you do if the student did not move in?
So what we've done in the past is we've allowed them to complete the semester and exited them at the semester.
And I'm just imagining that if you did not, right? I mean, because it doesn't spell out here that if you've, kind of come in either under legitimate pretenses and haven't gone through with it, or false pretenses and haven't gone through with it, right? That you get to complete the semester. And I'm imagining that have you ever had a student resist leaving at the end of the semester and appealing to the board, the county board?
No, not I have not had anyone in my time do that.
Any other comments, questions? And we're attaching, that was the plan. You made me think of it, Cynthia, about the county board. From now on, we're attaching our board policy and AR when we send
appeals.
Right. Okay.
Off the top of your head, do you know how many would qualify for or have qualified over the last 2 years under that paragraph 6?
I can think of one. Yeah.
Anything else? This is the first reading.
This is just a first read, yeah.
And
so, question. Would you like me to add clarifying language to 6? Would you like me to strike 6? The reason I had it in there is I do think it's a good opportunity for students to be able to start a school year with the beginning of the year. That was my only thinking around that one.
Right, I think it's realistic relative to people who are trying to move in the district, trying to buy a house, and maybe looking around for the summer and, find something in mid-July. But I think it's important to figure out how to clarify if they execute a lease but don't move in, or a definitive purchase and sale agreement and ultimately don't transact. That
I
discretion.
could add clarifying language around, should these conditions not be met, the student will be exited at the semester's end. No?
That makes me uncomfortable at the semester. That's half a year that students, and we're in a district that's bursting at the seams. And so it sounds mean, but we're protecting the resources for the community that the community pays for with property taxes and parcel taxes and bonds. And I don't want to create any impression that there's a way for someone, and why I asked about appealing to the county board is I've also seen it appealed to the county board after a student has started, and and been in a district for a month and then has been able to play on the compassion of the board to say, well, gee, it's going to harm them, exiting them out after a month. And so then they've been granted staying for a full year.
And that's the county board. I just want to make that clear.
Well, no, I know. But if we put something in.
No, I know. I just want to make clear. 'Cause
Yes.
you said board, and I just want to make sure people knew that you were referring to the.
Well, I'm actually
County.
talking about a different district, but I'm not even talking about our district, this district. I'm talking about a different district. So, well, I'll put it out there and then the board can take it or not. I would say that if it doesn't go through, you're disenrolled from the district.
Well, I think so. And then the district, you have likely there's some leeway in terms of when you enforce that. But I'd say put the wording in there in terms of, essentially it's.
We normally, so the way the procedure goes now, if we find out that someone is no longer a resident of the district, we issue a 10-day notice and they have to vacate within 10 days. They have to, enroll in their school within their district, their home district within 10 days.
And I would say that should be the same here.
Okay.
Right. I mean, as long as you make it perfectly clear that they're moving it at their risk. I mean, they may be making a legitimate effort to move into the district, but if they don't perform, that's their risk.
Okay.
And I guess the only exception would be someone's closing in that 30-day window, they don't get the certificate of occupancy, it's pushed out 10 days, there's an issue created with that. So that's why just to have some flexibility there, just to be reasonable with it, if it's not something where they're backing out of it. I don't think we want to kick someone out because they can't close back up by 12 days.
For me, it's like, I think once we have the policy, it's easier to just follow it than have exceptions. I know it sounds weird, even a day, but it's hard. And I think if you closed within, you would own the property. So that would allow you to enroll, right?
We know you might not be able to close until if there's some.
And Tara, I just want to clarify. So, number 1, 2, 4, and 5. Well, number 1 was covered above.
Yeah.
But 2, 4, and 5 are no longer reasons.
Right. They'll be strucken from the policy. Struck from the policy.
I know.
Karen, just for some background maybe, because I don't know if you're looking at the siblings attendance or any of the categories, but we have had a case recently where we denied an IDT, or Tara denied an IDT. The family appealed, and it was for the basis of them wanting to have a chance. It was for the student to have a chance to be a member of programs in the district that they said that their home district didn't have, and the county board granted the interdistrict transfer, which turns into a 4-year interdistrict transfer, and then according to the policy, the old policy, that person could then bring their siblings to the district, even though we had initially denied the IDT, and then that compounds the number of students that come in who are not bringing any dollars with them.
Completely agree with that one. Number 4 is probably where I have some concerns that if a student is a senior and if their family has to move out of having been in that position 30 some odd years ago.
Yesterday.
20 years ago. My family moved and I stayed behind and finished my high school.
Yeah. So I think the idea is at number 3, to allow a student to complete a school year.
Okay, that would include the seniors.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you're right.
And you also, would you also stay living in the district? I did. Yeah. So.
not with my family.
And maybe not
Right.
their residence.
Right.
Right. Well, we have means of that too.
You have means of that, though.
There's-
Come and take
yeah.
temporary guardianship.
Guardi-
right?
yeah.
Because you're still living within the district. That's right.
Yeah.
I wasn't, but I understand.
Yeah.
Yes, 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 yes.
Do you think you have the feedback you need?
I think so, yeah. I'll try to clarify 6.
Okay. Very good.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Any public comment on this AR board policy?
So I agree with the issue raised by Director Ronish. You have a situation in the district where you have a larger than expected number of students, and it's generally understood that some of them were not district residents, and the district's doing a good job of trying to identify that. I think that allowing students to come in when they don't have an executed purchase, and worse yet, an executed lease, which is not really an unexecuted lease, is in no way binding, just opens a can of worms. And I think particularly at a time when you're trying to demonstrate that your extra enrollment on which you are basing the parcel tax is going to students who actually live here, I think that this is a bad decision, and that that in general, parents who are moving into a district try to purchase a house or close a lease in time for the students to start at the beginning of the school year. So I think the onus is on them.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you for that comment.
I think with this, though, I guess,
Yeah.
talking amongst the board here, this isn't a requirement that we grant every appeal here. It's just one of the reasons we could.
Mhm.
Correct.
Right. No, that's good clarification. Thank you. Anything else? So we're done with public comment. I think you have the direction you need, so thank you, Tara, for that. And now the next one is both you.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
On that, sorry.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I was looking for it, and I don't know if it's mentioned in the policy, but when we grant IDTs, presumably there's behavior agreements that go with it. Okay, so if
Yep.
they violate the behavior agreement, okay, thanks.
And attendance.
Okay, next up, discussion of potential parcel tax renewal. This is Corbett and Tara, but I see Tara by yourself up
Yeah.
there.
So this is not new. This is the exact same presentation made the last time. Again, just trying to give the board and public opportunity to have full discussion around a potential parcel tax renewal. So I think this was the slide that was generating the most conversation. And we're just, as staff, while it is only September 24th, we don't have that many board meetings before we would need to make a decision. And if we wanted to place a measure on the ballot by December 6th. So we have 2 meetings in October and 1 meeting in November. So we would have to have a resolution completed and approved within 3 board meetings. This is not an action item tonight, but we are looking for some direction from the board. If you would like us to proceed in developing a potential resolution for a parcel tax renewal, and under the terms and structure that we've presented.
I'll have an open question for board members. We've been receiving information about this for some time. Is there any information in particular any of you think you need to gather before or get from the district before potentially giving them direction to begin working on a resolution?
With what, in terms of amount? And
And term. And the amount that and that's why I wanted to raise that, the amount at the last meeting, I want to make sure I say it right. There was the straight renewal, and then there was an amount that was based on the forecasting work that Corbett and Cabinet did in terms of looking out the next 10 years. I should probably look at the slides that are up here rather than mine from last meeting. And so that's what we want to, find out now what else we need to go over before asking them to come up, start working on a resolution, but we wouldn't be making a final decision until, like you said, November.
Mm-hmm.
It would be authorizing them to start working on the resolution with legal counsel.
my thought broadly is I think I'll recognize the need for the parcel tax and an increase, recognize that there was community support for it, and I think moving forward with where this would be the right thing to do. I think between now and the next 3 board meetings to have greater confidence in terms of exactly what we're doing in terms of the specific number, but I think generally in that range. But I think it would be good to, as a board, to talk about the multi-year forecast for everything.
So you want to bring that back again to talk about the multi-year forecast?
Well, I think it was something we talked about several meetings ago, and I don't think we've discussed it in terms of this multi-year forecast since that time. And so just the same comment as before.
Okay. Maybe we can discuss it now, because it would probably be good since it's on the agenda, the concerns about the multi-year forecast, the one that went out 10 years and based on the more in-depth demographic study and the work that you did.
Yeah. So we have
maybe
the-
we should probably talk about it now if we
Some
can.
of that's up there. I think is that what you're referring to?
Well, I guess the concern is just that the same as before, we hadn't discussed it as the current board in terms of multi-year projections for the current board. So one member hadn't had that discussion, and the rest of the board hadn't had the benefit of that new board member's perspective on it, and just thought that would be.
So I guess one thing what you're probably not aware of is that Corbett and Tara met individually alone with Karen,
Right.
and went through the multi-year forecast with the budget. So she has that information. So maybe it would be a good time for you to share with us any if you have any further questions. Do you feel like you need more time? Because you definitely, if you need more time to understand how the district came to the revenue projections and expenditures and how they came to that number that they recommended that the district would need?
I don't need any more information. I have the benefit of having become very familiar with the budget numbers over the past couple of years and definitely understand where there are deficits due to higher expenses, less income. I thought Corbett and Tara did a great job presenting the numbers, and it was a very specific number that they got to satisfy what it is that we need to not only get through the enrollment growth, but to become, to build up a reserve that is within our board goals.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very satisfied with the number in terms of how we got there. Yeah.
Right. So it's been several weeks since the presentation, but I do. My comfort level with the numbers, I don't think it's too. I want to say greedy, but I want to think of a better word. It's not like you're still working within a bandwidth that's reasonable. It's not that we're not continually to. It didn't just come out of the sky. That's all I'm trying to say.
And the goal was to ensure that we would have a balanced budget within 5 years. And so, to use a euphemism, we weren't going for the Cadillac. We weren't looking at like, so, aside from restoring somebody to ed services and rebuilding some form of teacher leadership, the budget, and those are in the budget.
Right, that was in the
already.
budget.
Those are so with that, so we're not talking about, other things being restored. That was what the assumptions we went off of. And the idea was, what do we need to ensure that we have a balanced budget in 5 years, and we are at the board's requested reserve of 17%.
And I think you need to clarify when you say have a balanced budget in 5 years, it's implying that it's not balanced.
No, we will continue to have a balanced
Right,
budget.
that's, I just want you to say that one more
go
clearly.
into-
Yeah, you're saying,
Yes.
yeah, it's like,
Right.
okay, just
Mhm.
wanted to
Right.
highlight that. Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Mhm.
And so I want to open it up. So I want Dan, you to make sure you have your time. Is there other parts to it you'd like to discuss or ask?
I think we can move forward in terms of that overall number. I think in terms of our function of oversight, though, between now and final approval, and if we look at the budget, we have essentially, call it the 80% of the budget that's going to be driven by property taxes, call it roughly 70%, 10%, then state and federal, then 20. It'll
Right.
end up being about 20% from this.
Right.
This is the only part where we have some ability to influence the number, and so I just think that in terms of oversight, we should spend more time on it too before the final approval.
Mm-hmm, okay.
You're suggesting just to take one last look at the numbers and make sure we're all good before we actually write the resolution?
Well, in terms of before the resolution, the last time we talked about it was July. The projections for enrollment have changed since July, and enrollment's the biggest driver of the budget.
Right.
Yeah, so our projections for enrollment haven't actually changed. We had staffed conservatively. We had that anomaly bump show up of about 100 students, which realized somewhere around 30, 35. And we had actually staffed closer to the zero showing up, saying to our principals, who were nervous about it, let's wait and see. So as far as that goes, our projections, our enrollment projections have not drastically changed since July. Nor has the actual adopted budget and multi-year projection. Those things have not changed. Is that what you were going to say?
Briefly, if I just add to that. Yes, you did.
Yeah.
The adopted June budget and the multi-year projection is our most current snapshot. That has not changed, nor will it change until the first interim budget report, which is in December, which is obviously after our deadline for considering passing a resolution. The only thing that has changed is, per the unaudited actuals, the starting reserve levels, which was adjusted in our multi-year projection. So everything else that we have is current. This is the most current information we'll have comprehensively. Yes, there's always going to be enrollment shifts here and there, but those are all within the parameters of the assumptions built into this analysis that we've reviewed.
So with that being said, what information are you
I guess,
waiting for?
So I understand that I guess if we look at this year, at that time there's an expectation that we would have 100 more than the feeder district numbers would have led us to believe. In the end, it was not 100, but it was 30. So that's a difference of 70 students. If we think of the per student costs, whether it's sort of just the all-in or just sort of marginal, it makes a difference. And so I guess I would think that should influence our thoughts in terms of the future years and whether we're going to use the numbers, I think, that were from Decision Insights, and just what we would think about that. And I just think it would be, again, we can move forward with this in terms of drafting, but I think between now and final approval, we should just have greater certainty on that.
I think we could bring back our enrollment projections and talk about how that translates into dollars to what Dan is saying, and I think that, it's always a good exercise, and, what does the next couple of years look
Right.
like? And, that right now we do still see, another year or two of enrollment, and then we start to drop off. So I think I can certainly bring back their enrollment projections and talk a little bit about how that influences budgeting and staffing ratios.
And I think that'd be good to have at the next meeting then, if that's what we're waiting on, because I do actually think we need to start committing to a number. I don't think we start committing to the number in November because the community has to start talking about it. They have to get the narrative and the justification for it. So I don't believe that we should be waiting on the number until the filing deadline.
I do want to clarify, I agree and disagree. I agree that we don't, it's until we pass the resolution, it's not rock solid. And so we are providing the community information of how we came up with that number. But getting my flashbacks, if, the previous board, we went down a path and then the polling results dropped again in July to 56% approval. So it did change things at the last minute for us, even though we were moving. So I'm just trying to say for Dan's benefit that yes, if something new comes out in the next few months, there will be an opportunity. But if we can start moving with 190 is what we right now we envision. I think we can do both, but it doesn't mean that it won't give us time to continue to flush out, hear more about the enrollment. That'll help the community also. I mean, the more, now we really do need to start bringing these things back up again and talking about it. Does that sound right? Does that sit okay?
Right, yes, again.
Okay, yeah.
Until we approve it, it's sort of, the number it's a placeholder. Obviously, it's one we're moving towards, but if polling changes, whatever the events are.
Well, we're not going to, no, he was using that example because that's the example I used. And I think, I really see Dan's point that he just wants to bring this, it's been a few months, let's bring it forward again. It'll be good for the community. Actually, our consultant said to do the same thing. We need to get this information out again, and it'll give everyone even a better level of comfort. So I think that's a good point. So this isn't an actual action item on the agenda, but we did say on the agenda that the board may provide direction to the district to start working on the resolution for the parcel tax renewal and the structure of that, and that includes the rate and the duration. And so we just now talked about the rate, and I think we're in agreement that for you to move forward with that rate. Is there any reason to discuss the duration, the 10-year duration, before giving them direction to go ahead and use that duration? Okay. So do you feel like you have
Thank you.
What you need? Okay, I think too, I'm going to let the board know this, and I'm not saying this just because I see a couple people in the audience. The board received a letter from COST, and I do plan on responding to that letter describing more thoroughly what additional work we would be undertaking and the timeline, as well as providing clarification of what our polling results were. So I may bring that to the board for your approval, or I may not, and it'll just be from me, but it depends on how much information is in there. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and that's something too that I know we'll want to talk about as we move forward with governance, because there are times we get communications and we need to think more about how we respond to them and make them more transparent. So that can be part of our governance discussion. So before I open to public comment, does anyone else have any? Yep, I see I thought you were going for your microphone, but you're going for your laptop. Okay, thank you. So I'll open it up for public comment.
Hi, my name is Laura Effel. I live in Larkspur. Most of you know me, but I had not yet met the newest trustee. I sent a letter last evening to all of the trustees with copies to the superintendent and Mr. Elson, recommending that you consider a square foot parcel tax, because we think this is much more appealing to many of the voters who will be voting on this parcel tax. And I think you need additional approvals from the voters. Let me remind you that the last time you went out to the voters for a parcel tax, it wasn't a slam dunk, but you did have the endorsement of cost, and you featured that prominently in your campaign. And we think it helped put it over, and you got the parcel tax. We think you have that possibility again this time, and we hope you will seriously consider the square foot parcel tax. Because I think this letter doesn't go into the record, let me just point out that you would not be responsible for determining the square footage, because Marin County is going to be doing that for their own parcel tax for the JPA having to do with fires. That's a very popular notion, and we think that when that appears on the March 2020 ballot, it's almost certain to pass. And some of the other objections based on legal issues, I think, haven't been updated. Of course, you want to check with your counsel to make sure that that would be an appropriate thing to do. But the law has changed recently, and you need to be up to date on whether that's appropriate for you. So we urge you to consider this seriously, because most of your voters are going to find it more appealing to have a square foot parcel tax rather than the usual flat parcel tax. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Mimi. Yes, exactly.
Mimi Willard from Kentfield. Just to follow up, I really want to encourage the board to have a discussion in open session about the $190 number. I know it's the number that you need. I know it's the number that you want, but that doesn't mean that's the number that the voters will give you. And I really think you have a responsibility to have that discussion. You have a 66% polling on that 190, which is basically a toss-up. You've got a 50-50 chance of getting that number. In your informed polling, it was mentioned on the the opposition statements, the fire tax, which will be an issue. You're in the southern part of the county. The houses are a little bigger. It's probably going to be, on average at 10 cents a square foot, maybe $250 a parcel. There's the quarter-cent smart renewal, and the MMWD's bills just arrived. I looked at mine, and I'm going to go up $550 to $600 this year. And then and people didn't really do those numbers till they saw their bills. Meanwhile, I've just been reading in the last couple of weeks within the IJ that Mill Valley is probably going to put a school bond on the March ballot. You might want to check into that. So that's part of your constituency. You're getting hit several times. And then there's going to be a one percentage point new regional sales tax. This is, again, new info that wasn't polled for. And there might be, it's probably later in the year, but it might be on the March ballot, a regional parcel tax for affordable housing if it clears Newsom's desk. So you were at 50-50 and you only polled for the fire. So I would just encourage a really robust discussion. Go back and talk to your consultants and ask them, should we go for the 90 as opposed to the 190, putting aside or in addition to the issues that Laura raised. Finally, I would just say that in the past, Leslie at least has heard me say in many board meetings what a great attitude there has been towards public engagement. And I'd like to see restoration of some of those things that were positive. That public comment was at the beginning of the meeting, that important things like this that matter to the public were at the beginning of the meeting, and that letters of import went into the board packet. And I think that in the few times I've been recently, I don't see a whole lot of people here, and I think that's unfortunate as far as public engagement. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Okay, I think the next topic is review of governance handbook, right? So Mary, I didn't even look. Did we get copies of that again, or are they? It's not your fault. I didn't remember to ask you to. Thank you. Oh, I bet you I bet you I have it. You're so good at this, my goodness. Did I lend it to you? Okay, I thought I had it. Okay, so a couple things. We have an option to just pick one or just start from the beginning, but also I was hoping, gosh, where is my brain tonight? Yeah, it was more just maybe people could be thinking about it. I think you probably remember at the end of the last meeting, I made a comment that I just, I didn't think that Cynthia Ronish and I were communicating very well at the last meeting. And so I wanted to go and consider what I could do. And it was actually funny because when we started this notion, Cynthia had brought some norms, and I struck out a couple to even consider, and then I thought, well, maybe we do want that in there. And it had to do with body language during listening, because I realized that somehow was rattling me. But then I have to be honest, I watched the video, and I thought, what was the problem, Leslie? So it must be there, and so I apologize. I'm not really big because it didn't come across in the video. But so I'm a little on the fence about it, but maybe it's a lot of us. I just need to express this to the board that it's something I just react to, and it's I react to emotion and what I sense as being impatient, but it when it actually is probably just being passionate. But it's just something that, whether we have to add the norm or not, I'm just throwing it out there to the board that when I'm always trying to gauge what people are, if somebody needs to talk or how the board is, I get sucked in sometimes when I sense what comes across to me is anger, to be honest. So it's just, I just thought I'd follow up from the last meeting so we can decide whether we need to add a norm or not. Why don't you think about it? Maybe just me expressing that is all that's necessary, to tell you the truth. But so there's that. And then what we could do is start with the protocols to facilitate governance leadership, and just start with the topics and go start with one and do one or two at each meeting for the next few meetings. Does that make sense to you all? Or is there any of these that you'd rather start off earlier, that you think we need to discuss now, before we do number one? I was just going to go in order, unless any of you see something here that you really think we should talk about before anything else. I see nodding heads, so I think we're okay, right? Okay. Not talking heads, but nodding heads. So topic one, Board of Trustee meeting agenda development. Maybe I'll give everyone a chance to look at that. I stole somebody's, but this one actually is something that we already talked a little bit about, and at the last meeting we threw out ideas, and maybe this is a question for the group. we threw out ideas, and I think they're in the meeting minutes, and I have the list. Should we, in our meeting, and they are in the meeting minutes, but does that afford us then at the next meeting to discuss any of those topics that we want to prioritize for the board to bring forward? Because any board member can always ask for a meeting agenda item, and you submit it to the board president and the superintendent. And then during the agenda planning meeting, we would go over it. But like I said before, I wanted to still have an opportunity at the end of meetings for people to throw it out, because you often hear something from somebody else, and it jars your memory, or it makes you realize, oh, that is something I'd like to do, and it adds a little more traction to it. But just like the case with the last board meeting, we came out with several ideas, and then it didn't go anywhere. I think we noted it during our agenda planning meeting, but we knew we had a full agenda, but it might be, maybe that's what, a way we do it. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? Is that something we should add to this? That, for instance, it was noted that we had these ideas, so at this meeting, maybe on the agenda, we should have said, discuss agenda items that the board raised at the last agenda meeting, and to prioritize. Any thoughts on that? And again, it's just really for the Brown Act, so that rather than talk it through at the end of last meeting, since it wasn't agendaized, and if we start talking about cell phone use or how we do board policy, then we're getting into discussion. But we threw out ideas so that it was documented, and then where does it go from there? Sometimes I don't like things just to be left up to the board president, clerk, and the superintendent, because the board member should have an opportunity to discuss what aspect of a certain topic they think needs to come to the board as either an information item or an action item. So maybe that's what we do next time, is we have an agenda item that says agenda topic discussion, and list what topics have been thrown out by board members. It's just an idea, but then sometimes that can open you up to I don't know what adjective to use or noun, but that might complicate things too. Do you have any thoughts, Tara?
I think it's more on what the board is comfortable with as far as having access, I guess.
Well, there are two things. I mean, because we can always ask at the end of the meeting, right?
Yeah, put this on the agenda.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, like we did here.
Right,
yeah.
So that might actually come up during the meeting, and then maybe, so that's always available as an option. And then maybe once a month, maybe put it on the agenda. Are there, you have 5 minutes, 10 minute discussion, future agenda topics, and then maybe people, because that kind of gives them a heads up to think about, okay, this is the second meeting of the month. This is where we come forward. And it's always going to depend on how urgent the item is and then how full the agenda is. That would be a hybrid. Are people feeling as if they have ideas that are, or questions or subjects that they would like to see on the agenda that aren't on the agenda?
I don't feel like I have any issues getting stuff put on the agenda. I mean, I feel like if I wanted to, I could ask, and I feel there's a path to make that happen, if that's what you're asking.
Okay. Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to judge which items to put on and when, the priority, and sometimes I hate making that decision. And for instance, sometimes a solo board member will ask for a topic, and you'll think, well, it's just one board member asking for that topic. Don't really have time. There's no decision that has to be made, so we'll do that in March. But then when it's brought up for the full board, then you find out, well, everybody really finds that as a high priority. It's really not missing, the board members don't know what they don't know. And I have heard topics raised that I hadn't even occurred to me, that I think, wow, that I didn't think of that, and that's actually pretty important. That it's that part of the equation I want to make sure we have an option for.
So it's up to the clerk and the president to meet with the superintendent to
Right.
deem what is put on the agenda. Are we allowed to have during a meeting an agenda item that says possible agenda topics? Is that what you're saying? Can we do that? Or
That was how we were trying to figure it out. That's
Yeah.
why we didn't talk about it last time, because it wasn't agendaized. And for instance, I know there's people out there that are very, very concerned about the district and what we're doing about addressing the vaping issue. So I didn't want to get into a big discussion about that when we hadn't agendized it.
Right.
But it's something I also would like to hear more about what we're doing in this regard. Part of that reason is going to that meeting that you and I went to last spring, and I learned a lot, that I realized the district's doing a lot more than I ever knew, and I think it would help the whole board to hear about it, because we have community members calling each of us, and it'd be really nice to have an actual dialogue with the full board. That's my example. And, yeah.
Isn't that something we could talk about during the trustee reports and then decide if we want to turn it into an agenda item?
No, that's the problem, because then we're starting to get into a big
Okay.
discussion about,
I mean,
we
should put a section on the agenda at the end that says future, and we already have it, don't we have future agenda items on there or not? Do we not have those categories? I would propose adding that as a category, and then we take suggestions, and those go on there. Right, I mean, we take notes.
yeah.
Right? And then we discuss it in our,
Oh, I did add it into the trustee, I did, you're right, I added it to the trustee reports. Yeah, that this is where yeah, and that's what we did, yeah, we added that trustees can suggest what they would like. So you did last time, so now what? We didn't talk about it, so I'll just prioritize we had like 5. So I guess we could do that, I just would, it'd be nice to have an option to hear people weigh in on it, is all, but. That brown act sometimes makes it tough.
well, we can,
I just have to think it through.
People feel as if they're not being heard.
And that's the main thing, you're okay,
Right,
yeah, so
I
that's
think
the main thing,
open and
yeah.
That passed there, and it would be good to have at least a monthly check-in on items.
Right.
In a meeting, what future items. I imagine some of this is gonna come out of when we start having our DIAD meetings.
Yeah.
Because that's where we're checking in with superintendents giving
Right.
us information, but then also, we might be saying what a community member's called us with, and, actually, what is the district doing around vaping, or something
Yeah.
like that, and then that might come out of that as well.
Right, right, I think that sounds good. I don't see anything else on this one that I have any concerns about. I don't see it up there. Does anyone?
I think it looks good.
Yeah, I do
Do
too.
we want to do one of these each meeting, or what do we want to do?
Why don't we do the next one to kick it off, because I think we redid this so that it was easier. Oh, thank goodness, yeah. So why don't we just do topic 2?
Meeting preparation.
Yeah. I do have to give a shout out to the superintendent. The board members are definitely equally informed. No, I mean, I'm very impressed with how you manage that, Tara.
And so, yeah, the stuff you send out to us, but then encourage us to really meet in dyads and keep our dyad meetings to the extent we can, because it cuts down the number of times Tara has to update us. And that's really kind of one of the purposes of meeting in dyads.
I think we have them scheduled, right? I think I have one more month of, I think we have them scheduled through this semester.
Yeah, but then
Yeah.
we keep those meetings. We make those meetings.
And here's the one, board will strive to keep open session meetings to no more than 4 hours. And that was based on, not decompensating, what is the word I'm looking for? We stopped being effective. But I think somebody made the note that at the last meeting, I said something about being tired, and it's true. On tape, I have to be a little more careful, but we do try and keep it to 4 hours, and we'll just stick with that. Yeah, it's all standard stuff, and I don't see anything that we need to. Well, we really accomplished a lot. That was good. We got 2 done. And I think even closed session, we're pretty good. May not even have to spend much time on that.
Well, I just want to stop at 2 so we can get the trustee reports.
Yeah, that's a good idea. You're not saying you're tired. I know. Shoot, I just realized I wrote on yours, but, okay. So let's get to trustee reports. Anyone want to go first?
I'm just going to quickly comment on the Redwood TAM game and really echoing the students' observation. It was such a great community building event.
Oh, good.
Parents, students, staff, administrators were there. Everyone had a really great time, and it made me think we should try to do more of these late afternoon games, if possible. And boy, do I wish we had lights. I know that's a whole nother topic, but it was such a great alternative for kids to spend their time doing that. And it was Thursday night. It wasn't a Friday night. Sorry, the varsity played Friday, but the Thursday night was very well attended too. So I really,
very nice.
It was really great.
LCAP meeting, I guess, a week and a day ago, mostly just talking about, thinking about what one wants in terms of student achievement or what a student should have at for graduation, but not phrasing it so well now, but maybe it's that we're over 3 hours, so I'll pass on that.
So I had the opportunity to go, actually helped arrange Denise Pope's group, Challenge Success, coming to Alameda High School for the first time last week. And a woman came, Margaret Dunlap, with the community that we had reserved last spring, and spoke on college fit. And finding the right college for kids. And it was extraordinarily well received. 170 parents in the audience at Alameda High, which broke several records for, usually it's 10 people for parent ed. And they really responded to it. And so it was neat to see. So organizations that we've worked with here, that Kentfield's worked with, that are more common in Marin County, kind of now moving into the East Bay. And kids appreciated it too. It was for parents, but a lot of kids came to school the next day saying how their parents had talked about it. And so,
that is good.
Yeah,
it's good. Let's see. Actually, I have something to report. Kevin, you did have something to report, but you forgot. Kevin and I continue to be involved with the political consultant and Corbett and Tara, and we had a conference call. It was between the last board meeting and this one. It was last week, I think. And they're still providing good consultation on this informational gatherings that we're doing, and all systems go with moving forward. So it's good.
Actually, that does remind me of one thing that I can report. So I went to a party at some friend's house. It wasn't my friend, it was a friend of my friend's in San Rafael on, I guess it was Saturday night. And I was talking to the people that own the house, or the woman in particular, her husband. And they said, oh, yeah, our son's going to go to school next year. He's going to go to Drake. I said, oh, yeah. He said, does you know, there was a divorced couple. And I said, oh, does his dad live within the district? He said, no, but, you know, whatever her name is, her mom lives in the district. So we're just going to use her address. And I was just thinking, I am not the person to give that information to. So it goes to the, you know, capturing enrollment and understanding how people slip into our district. I thought it was, it was unfortunate that they delivered that comment to me. So anyway, that's how it happens, apparently.
Did you ask for their card after, I guess? Yeah, okay. Sorry, it's not funny, I'm laughing, but this is why the 4-hour mark, you know, people remember me. I just start laughing because I get tired.
Do you want me to read the board norms now?
Yeah. Okay, you can go ahead and read board norms, please.
I'm reading all of them, or I'm just reading the two?
Oh, no,
that I
just
think? Yeah.
just make a comment.
I
Say
think-
rose and glows, whatever.
Yeah,
it is, or-
I
no,
think-
yeah,
I think
whatever.
that
Thorns and roses, something.
we did a good job of giving full attention to the proceedings, and I think we can improve on more humor. Just, I mean,
So we have to have long meetings because I just start laughing
Yeah.
at everything, so.
going crazy tired.
Oh, good. Well, I think that's it. And thank you, everybody. Very productive meeting. And thank you, Karen, again. That was great. The student trustee orientation, I think that went really well. Thanks.